All right, hello and welcome everybody back to the Game Dev Show. We're here again with Yorai and Johnny today, and myself, Jason. We'll be talking about Unreal, Unity, and a couple other game dev related topics. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff. Yorai found some really cool stuff. One day I'll get my pointing direction right. He found a lot of really interesting stuff that we wanted to go over last week and didn't get a chance to, and he was just giving us a quick preview. It sounds really cool. And then Johnny had some interesting stuff to share as well. But first, I just wanted to really briefly say I started sending out the mastermind invites, so keep an eye out for emails. Those are coming now over the next week. You should start to see an email for them with your group and your group info. So if you applied for that, just watch for it and make sure that you hit the buttons and reply and all that. Also, I've opened up the giveaway in the background. You can just join by choosing a race and class. I'll hit the H button so that it pops up with a little bit of help and you can see it. But you can just watch and chat or talk about it in chat, and people will tell you that nobody can see that. That is way too small.
Yeah, it's
but
way
anyway,
too blurry.
you can jump in and join in. It looks like Frost Game Dev just joined us.
The depth of field effect kind of blurs out the the screen there. But no, yeah. I think it looks cool with it back on the TV there.
Yeah, I like it, having it up there with the name showing and then doing like a little preview. I was trying to play around with Cinemachine a little bit and set some stuff up. Oh, there comes Twisted Liver Studio. So if you want to enter the battle to win a free copy of Rider, just join in with everybody else. And at the end of the show, we'll give that away. The other things I wanted to quickly mention, there's an Easter sale going on. You can check that out at game.courses. It's wrapping up tonight. And then the Game Dev Guild is coming up next month. So I actually had some really exciting stuff to share about that. I talked to another network developer, the developer of Fishnet, who has agreed to speak there. So I'm really excited about that. I did a big stream yesterday where I went through and built out a very small scale multiplayer game with Fishnet, but it was extremely easy. I just wanted to get some experience with it because I put up a poll and everybody seemed to love it. And then I tried it out myself and I was very impressed. So I was really excited to see that he's agreed to come speak and kind of share some info and share some knowledge. So that'd be really cool. If you're interested in that, just go to gamedevguild.com. You can check that out. Okay, so outside of that, do you guys have any big announcements or anything that you want to share or mention before we get started?
Not really. I guess I could mention though that I've installed Adobe Premiere, which is one step closer to making a video someday.
Nice.
So specifically, somebody asked if I could make like a short video about a topic related to game dev, and I ended up recording it, but I was stumbling over my own words way too many times, so I decided to just record it in parts and then cut it out and figure it out as I go. But I didn't have any video editing software, so I had to like look for something, and I already know that Adobe Premiere is like the golden standard. So I went with Adobe Premiere Rush, but I didn't get acquainted with it enough to finish editing the video. But yeah, it's one is at least happening. At least one video.
One leads to more. Right? It'll become like an addiction. You make one. That was too easy. I got to make another one.
Yeah, it's the gateway, as it's called.
Yeah, gateway video.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic because things are moving towards a direction I don't want, and the video is specifically about how things move.
That's funny. My wife's brother actually started a YouTube channel too, just this week.
Nice.
Finally convinced him, which is going to be really interesting. I'll have to share that once he's ready doing some car mechanic stuff. So totally unrelated to game dev, but I always tell people if you got a hobby or something you're really into, just share it with people. People will be interested.
Absolutely, yeah.
Get out there and get it in front of people. What about you, Johnny? Anything cool going on?
Definitely a lot of cool things in the works. Kind of started experimenting around with my little sample project that I'm going to be showcasing in the Game Dev Guild conference coming up. So, definitely stay tuned for that one. But yeah, I mean, a lot of, cool things that I'm kind of starting up here and got in the works. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and if you're not subscribed, go check out Johnny's channel. It should be linked down below. If it's not, it's definitely linked on my page, and I'll make sure that we get it into the description. Yora, you had a
Yeah.
question here that popped up about your
Yeah.
shirt.
So yes, this is the shirt from the crossover of the Terra and Don't Starve. There you
Nice.
go. It's really fancy and really comfortable. So I
I've
got
got
like
my
4 of them, and
Turbo
I'm
Makes Games shirt on.
awesome.
Nice. I have my branded shirt. Hey, everybody's wearing
Look
their
at
merch.
that.
It's perfect.
Look at that.
That's the way to do
Dream
it.
team.
You could stop wearing other people's clothes. That's my new rule. I just only
I'm still
wear
waiting
my
for
stuff and
yours,
my
by the
friends'
way.
stuff. What's that?
I'm still waiting for yours.
It hasn't come. It had
No.
weird problems getting stuff shipped in certain countries. It's kind of a pain in the butt. It depends on where it is, but I have to check on that and make sure that you get it. I got to send Vimlark some more hoodies too. Got a couple of cool ones for him, some interesting ones. So anyway, I guess welcome everybody. I think we could probably jump into some discussion stuff. Do you guys want to start with Unreal, or do you want to dive into Unity tools? I was thinking maybe we'll go with Unreal stuff first, but I don't know if you guys
Sure.
have a preference.
Well, specifically, we're talking about new Unreal 5.0 tech, but it's game dev related discussions in general. So as we go along, you'll see that it's kind of relevant to Unity as well. So I guess I'll just pick one of the topics and start.
Yeah, let's do
Let's
it.
get into it.
Yeah. So first off, I just want to direct everybody to the mention again that Unreal 5.0 released officially about 2 weeks ago now. And there's a gigantic changelog, and I went through every single one of the lines there, and I've taken notes. And there are many unsung heroes that I wanted to talk about here, because there are things that Unity could adopt as well, and they're not talked about enough, but they make the developer workflows way better. And specifically, even though Lumen and Nanite are amazing and pretty, they don't change the workflows that much for anyone but specific artists. So, for example, Nanite doesn't apply if you're not working on a high poly game, or Lumen doesn't really do everything for you if you need specific types of illumination that don't benefit from the global. For example, if you're doing too specific cell shading, or if you want a very specific visual style that isn't represented like physically accurate. That's it. It's amazing. It's pretty. I'm not saying it's useless. It's just
doesn't apply to every game type, right? You're building a pixel game, or something totally different. It might not apply.
Yeah. So there are many other things that are hidden in this gigantic changelog that people will skim over, but they're extremely important to think about and understanding the benefits of. So the first one I want to jump on is one file per actor, which is so when you're working on a scene, say in Unity, and you have a bunch of game objects, and you change the hierarchy, or you add a component, or remove a component, or move the components around, the order at which things are changes how the file is constructed. And if you move it around, you're basically changing the file, meaning if anybody else is trying to make changes on the same scene, same file, you might introduce conflicting changes. When working together, this is a mess because people are forced to work on one scene at a time, one person per scene, specifically. Unreal Engine 5 introduced a system called one file per actor, which in Unity terms is one file per game object instead of one file per scene. This lets people work together in the same scene, but changing different objects without conflicting with each other, which is great, especially because they added a gigantic, large open world system. And if you have two people that can't work on the same scene, but they're only seeing like one gigantic world, then it's going to be really, really difficult to figure out which scene you shouldn't be working on. So that system is enabled by default there, and it's something that I really want Unity to add, because we've had more than 50 conflicts in 1 week in one of the prototypes in Relogic.
No, so how does that
If they
work
did
with
that,
the,
it would be saving like So one file per object in there, maybe like in a folder then, and then some other folder file that's referencing which objects are just in that scene. I assume something similar to that.
I haven't looked into the actual internals, like what actual files contain, because as part of the developer workflow, you don't want to have to think about that. You
Oh
want
yeah.
it all.
No, I'm just curious what that looks like for like deleting things with your change lists and stuff. It was all.
Yeah, I mean, I assume the editor takes all of that for you because you can't like delete things in the editor and it will just do everything that it needs to. But it's really useful to think about what things are you breaking, what things are you going to conflict with whenever you're making a change. It's also something that came up when I was thinking about when you have a gigantic list of content for your game. There's this obsession I see people having with having a library object that just like contains a list of all the other objects in the game. If you have an ability system or an item system, you just want to be able to iterate over all the items. And people might start constructing all the items as an array within the single gigantic library object. But then they can't work together because they introduce, again, a monolithic object that if any changes occur, you conflict with other people. This is why I advocate for like small micro objects for like all the content we make in Terraria and Logic project. So it's something I wanted to talk about. Did you guys have any problems with like working together on scenes?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. That's why like multiple scenes were always a huge thing. This definitely can help with that because having to have a bunch of scenes just to separate things out was the one thing that this I think will kind of maybe resolve if we had something like this. But also just with like yeah, I've had constant like stomping on changes in scenes when we don't separate things out. So a lot of time what it is, by the way, for anybody who didn't know what the hell I'm talking about, is separated out by like some art section of the scene. So there'd be like a version of the scene or a part of the scene that is all environment art and the artists who work on it, and then another one that designers are working on, another one that has code related stuff. Mostly to minimize and reduce the chance of people breaking things, doing exactly that. Otherwise, it could all be in one scene.
Yeah. And also on that note, you mentioned just additive scene workflow just now, where you get multiple scenes for the same area and you load them up together. Unity has been having issues with how it supports additive scene workflows recently. Specifically, if you're looking at things like the new input system and multiplayer inputs, they have this multiplayer event system that's limited. It allows you to limit which game objects a single player can point at, and they let you set a root object within the hierarchy that says anything that's on under this object your player can interact with. But this doesn't let you do anything with additive scenes, because now if your UI is constructed in multiple ones, you can't interact with it because you only have one root object. So you have to start mangling the scenes together. It's something that I've been trying to commit change to and having no luck yet. But basically, additive scene workflows are amazing. By the way, Unreal 5 also has that. You can load multiple versions of your large world depending on different states. So you can say like, here's a village, and if here's a village after it's been ruined by the demon lord or whatever. It's a really fun talk.
Yeah, it seems cool. I definitely like just the fact that it would prevent me from having conflicts like alone. Like that fix that they've got in there seems good. And welcome, Jason. David said hello, or I guess not really said hello, but said something. It looks to me like you are not in Boston, which
No, I am not in
maybe we'll
Boston.
get into that later. I've been watching.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, welcome and hello. And then we've got there was a question here, but I think let's continue on with the other Unreal stuff that you've got, Yuri. Unless did
Yeah,
you want
sure.
to jump in and say anything real quick, Jason, while you're here? Or why
No, just a hello, so I don't interrupt. At least.
Good, yeah,
So
Yuri
it's
is
never
going over all the
interrupting.
cool stuff in
Amazing.
Unreal that we all missed. So
Yeah. So we just discussed one file per actor, and I already told you yesterday about the big rant there. But Let's continue. So another big thing, which ties into discussing working on this giant open world, is large world coordinates. This is a bit of a more complicated thing to discuss, but basically, when you have an object in Unity, it has a position in the world. That position is on free coordinates, and they are the transitional position, translational position in the world. And they are stored as free floating numbers with decimal floating point.
Which has a
But
float,
those,
right?
yeah,
Normally.
yeah, free floats. For one for the x-axis, one for the y-axis, and one for the z-axis. Left, right, up, down, forward, backwards. But each of these floats is only 4 bytes. Now, if you do math, you know that each of these 4 bytes can only hold up to 4 billion values, which isn't much when you're trying to store the infinity of accuracy. So as you get farther and farther away from the origin point, which this system was built around, your numbers get more and more inaccurate. Generally speaking, if you're going at, say, 5 kilometers ahead, 5,000, then you're already going to witness a small deviation if you're doing like small movements. And these are really frustrating when you're trying to construct giant worlds, because that's what the entire world seems to want to do these days with, say, Genshin Impact, Assassin's Creed, and insert any other big game, .exe.
Kirby.
Everything wants a giant world, yeah. Giant world with no loading in between, and it's got to scale. And this position thing becomes a huge issue. It doesn't become an issue until you get to a certain point, and then all of a sudden everything just breaks and it becomes a giant issue.
Yeah, and then they start sending you to different entire maps so they can circumvent that, and you'll never feel the problem. But
sometimes that does end up making a lot of design decisions. A lot of time, I've seen games where the decision was basically to do exactly that because of the floating point issue and the coordinates issue that you're talking about here.
Yeah. So Unreal 5 added large world coordinates, which lets you have double precision, which is basically 8 bytes instead of the 4, which increases your 4 billion times 4 billion values for the accuracy. So you can go way, way farther, way beyond any game would ever need, hopefully, and not have any of these issues. Now, this is a gigantic change because you have to introduce this in every single positional related thing in the entire engine and every single one of its plugins. And so it's not trivial work.
Get support for these new vectors, essentially, right? That support the larger size.
Yes, and it gets even more complex because some of these plugins may not be necessarily available for you to edit conveniently. For example, physics. The physics solution that Unity uses and Unreal used until they got Chaos. Those also have to support this double precision, or else you're going to start having a lot of problems. Or say, if you have particles in the world, every single one of them is going to consume double the memory now. There's going to be a bunch of other small things to think about there. They actually talk about the internals in one of the mentions here, where they're saying that their Niagara particle system is actually complex enough that they can't give it double coordinates, double data type coordinates for everything. So what they're doing is they're making it floats, but they're storing it per chunk index for the large worlds. And then they get to circumvent that problem. It's really interesting to talk about. Unity themselves also had an episode related to that. Basically, because of the floating point inaccuracy, as you get farther in the world, you'll start actually visibly seeing meshes deform incorrectly. Like if you go 50 kilometers ahead, meshes would just look wrong. I think it was in Europe. And then they introduced a floating point origin for the camera. So everything is drawing relative to the camera now. There is no longer this issue. It's a gigantic topic. So I'm really happy to see that being an option. It's something I've been begging Unity to have for years because I'm like obsessed about not having to worry about floating points.
I've known a lot of developers had this problem. It's not like it's a rare thing. I mean, I just thinking back through the past, I know probably at least a half a dozen to a dozen developers who've run into this on their own projects. Some of them big AAA games, and they have to basically develop a system similar to this, and it's never as good because it's not built in and integrated with everything.
Yeah. Also, on that note, Valheim has this giant world, and you'd think it'd be infinite because they have like dynamic generation and everything, but they actually adjusted the size so it goes. The edge of the world is right before you start actually visibly noticing any of the positional issues. So the world size is actually limited by the data type they're working with.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, it's a gigantic fun topic.
Nice.
And with this, I just hope to see a lot of systems like becoming more spatial. Sorry, it's difficult to say, but like not caring for the data type you're working with for positions, because one thing I'm really hoping to see is that eventually you'll be able to have scenes in parallel dimensions, a fourth axis, and then just not worry about if you want to make instance dungeons. That's something that you can't do regardless of if you're working with small worlds or large worlds. You just have to separate areas far away, or have like a system that doesn't care about how your scene looks. It's something you can't do in Unity right now, and as far as I'm aware, you couldn't do in Unreal either. With this, you can at least like send worlds really far away from each other and have kinda instanced areas. But if you're working on a custom engine, you can just do it like nilly-willy, just double the scenes. And
so before we hit the
question,
next topic,
yeah.
somebody wanted to know if you're using your real background right now.
Yes. So yesterday I talked with Jason while I was recording something, and we ended up discussing the topic of the background. And apparently, my room doesn't look outright terrible. So I'm really happy that I can use that instead of the green screen. Up until now, the green screen would be like right behind my shoulder, like actually touching it. So it was really cramped.
Yeah, now it's time to start decorating or continue decorating. Now it's like
My
once
bed
you
is
start to
behind me,
see
so
it
I
in
really
videos.
don't have the space.
No, you have all that wall space though. I was telling my
Yeah.
wife there's an extra spot on the wall that's not covered. She thinks I'm crazy. And that I covered, my entire office is covered in stuff. Though.
I know, Jason. I recently saw like one of your videos from like a couple years ago, and it looks like so empty compared to what it is now.
Yeah, it's a lot better now. I like it nice and full. I don't know. I don't like blank walls, but I would probably hate it if my whole house was like that. But I like my office like that, colorful and full of stuff that I like. So, what else did you like from this Unreal list?
Yeah, so the next one is something that's deeply close to my heart: pose warping. So this is actually a combination of 3 different new warping techniques they added to Unreal. Some of them have already been available for a few years, but now they're all officially integrated, not as a plugin, and working like out of the box together, and they are fantastic. I do recommend you click the pose warp. Oh yeah, they have the GIFs here, so it doesn't matter. So pose warping. When you're making an animation in a game, say a character running forward, you might be compelled to let the player have like a more natural movement. So they might want to run diagonally, or they might want to run sideways, and the likes of that. Usually, up to now, we'd have to make like 8 different animation variations, and then have like manipulators to say how much of the animations do we blend together, and it would get like really bloated asset wise, and figuring out how to offer all of that. And there's also going to be consideration for the speed of the character. So if you want the character to move slow, fast, medium, you'd have to make a variation of each of those for each of the orientations you have. So like a simple act of running in any direction in any speed would come to like having 25 animations and a very weird spiderweb looking blend tree for the animations. All of this gets solved with 2 simple nodes here. So specifically, The first one is called orientation warping. It's basically a node in Unreal that with just one animation, you can say, orientate part of the body in a different direction. And now you can control with code any single angle that you want, and the legs will go there instead. So now you can have your 8-way movement, no problems at all, with a single node addition. And
I wonder if
then
you
they
could do
have
that with the AMIK stuff in Unity, the animation rigging package. I wonder if you could
it's
get that same effect and have it point the legs
so
in a direction like that.
the AMIK not specifically, but if you're talking about the underlying technology animation rig, it's possible, but it's not trivial work. There's a lot that goes into having natural looking leg movement, and it also depends on the hierarchy of your object. So figuring out is not an amount of work that a single developer with like 2 days worth of research would comfortably do, at least not to the level that you see here.
I wonder if
But
that's
it is
something
good.
they could add though, like a
Yeah.
next level to kind of catch up on that. Add in some examples for just like because this is a big issue that it's one of the things that it's a pain in the ass to set up, and usually I just make like an 8-way blend tree that scales and call it good enough because it's too much work to get it all perfect unless somebody really cares.
Yeah, but
this
here's
is
the
just
thing
cool.
though. You're saying 8-way blend tree, but you need someone to actually give you those animations. If you don't have them, you can do that. With this, you can do
I
that
just go
with
to
any of the
Mixamo.
animations
If
here.
they're humanoids like this, I just grab it off Mixamo and pop those in until I
Yeah,
have
but
an animator.
yeah, but I mean the problem is you need an animator, and then even then it's like an amount of arbitrary work that nobody wants to do because you just need it for having a more natural project. With this, you can drop any single of the animations you have, just drop the node in, and they suddenly work with all those directions. This is the magic behind it. Also, regarding whether Unity could do this, they can, and there is an asset on the store that deals with the second node that I'm about to talk about, the stride warping node, which, as I mentioned earlier, if you're moving slow or fast, your legs will, when running, would be farther apart. This is the stride of your animation, and stride warping, found in the pose warping topic that they link to, lets you control how far the legs will move apart or together. So you can combine that with the orientation warping, and then have fast or slow movement in any of the directions out of the box with just 2 nodes. And this works, say, if you're making a fast sprint, fast jog, slow jog, weird walking fast, weird walking slow, all of that will just work if you just have a walk and run animation and you slap those on top.
Nice. Yeah, that looks it. And you said there was an asset that does this too?
Yes, so Unity has an asset on the store that does the same. I don't recall the exact name, but I think it had Stride in the name.
Yeah, it looks
I
like
did buy it.
that guy on the left
Yes.
is running around on a slippery floor or something. Like you see his feet just kind of whoop, 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 whoop.
Yeah. So the asset on the store is called Strider, and I think it relied on animation rigging, but it basically does the same technique as Unreal, in a sense. I didn't check the codes or comparison, so it might not be the exact one. But as far as I know, it's about the same amount of thinking work at play. It lets you control how fast your character moves in any of the directions that you're trying to send it. So it's really nice to have. That offset offer also has another asset in this category. I think it was the motion matching that we've talked about before on sale. Sorry if I'm just running my mouth too much.
No, it's interesting. Okay, motion. This is one I think I got on one of the discounts. So
Yeah.
it was on sale recently. You'd mentioned it.
Yes. So those two do the majority of your work, but then there's the third difficult obstacle for completely natural movement, and This is something I've been way more attentive to ever since Genshin Impact released, and I actually saw that the characters have like different animations for going up and down stairs, slope warping. So when you run on surfaces that are not even, character legs will tend to not take that into consideration. And when you run forward, the leg will go into the stair/slope because, the animation just is intended to run forward, not have anything in the way. Slope warping lets you solve that by adjusting the leg target positions to match the surfaces that you have. So if you're going down, the forward leg will be more down, the back leg will be more upwards, and vice versa. Combining all these three together, you have a character that can be stable on any freaking surface with just the basic animations that you got off the store, not having to have 50 million things to rig up together for every single coordinate combination in a
You don't have to make
3D
a
blend tree of
complex
hell.
animator to reach out the hand and lean on each different thing.
Yeah, I really want to see how Gigaya does that.
It's a very complex animator setup from what I understand, with lots of layers, and blending and stuff. I think there was a large amount of animation work in that. So something like this could be cool. Automating away a lot of that, at least for most of us that don't have the time and power to do all the animation stuff.
Yeah. Also, to just bring up a note on that, these are amazing notes, but they're not magic bullets. Gaia's hand over a wall thing is an entirely separate piece of code or animation that you won't be able to get even with all these notes. You're going to need to figure out where is a wall and whether to place a hand on it, and whether your slope position means that you might want to grab something at all or not. Entirely separate stuff. So Gigaya stuff is still super interesting and not deprecated by this at all.
Oh yeah, and it's a project you'd be able to just get in and play with as a starting point. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in there that I'm excited to kind of tear apart.
Yeah. So do you want to move to the next one, or do you have anything?
Yeah, let's go on to the next one. You got lots of cool
Okay.
character stuff.
Sure. So going for another character motion thing, motion warping. So this is different from pose warping in that it works on the character root motion. Specifically, for people who are unaware of the term, root motion refers to when you have an animation of the character, you may either have it running in place or moving in the world. When you make the animation in the world match the animation that the character physically does, like if the character moves 1 meter per second, they will move 1 meter in the world. We call that root motion. You're using the motion of the animation on the root of the character, the game object that plays the entire animation, moving it in the world. This root motion is pretty difficult to work with because it means that if your animation isn't perfect for where the character offsets are, you might have mispositioning of things. For example, if your character needs to move 1 meter forward to grab a door, but the character is only half a meter, then you'll suddenly end up in the door or trying to push yourself into it. Motion warping nodes in Unreal let you rig how the character should end up with their root motion. They let you manipulate the root motion to match what you need for gameplay purposes. So if you're near a door, make sure that as the character tries to move their hand to grab the handle, they will end up in the animation exactly where the handle is. This lets you make far better interactive worlds. So, for example, if you're trying to do parkour over a rock, you can make sure that the hand that lands, as soon as the land touches the surface that it needs to, it's actually over the rock itself and not floating or doing something weird. And you can also manipulate the rotation of the character so that even if you have a door that's sideways, it rotates the character to match the position that it needs to be. And this already had an identical technique in Unity, which you could call from on the animator humanoid version. And I'm trying to remember the name now because I ranted about it a week ago. Let me just figure out if I can find it really quick.
I'm not sure which one you're thinking of.
Unity documentation don't fail me now.
Have you guys looked at the stuff yet much, Johnny or Jason? Have you guys been taking a peek at the Unreal stuff, or have you had a chance to?
Not
Match target.
particularly.
There you go.
What's it called?
So match target in Unity's animator. I'm gonna give you a link one moment. So Unity has an equivalent technology, and it had it for years, by the way, which is called animator.matchTarget. This lets you set the target for where a portion of the character's body should be, or even the root itself, so that if you have a set of paired animations, say two actors trying to punch each other and the punches should connect, you can say that the two right hands should, at a single point in animation, like halfway in, should end up in a single world position, and they will both match that entirely properly. This is something that I see wildly underknown. It's kind of one of Unity's own unsung heroes in a sense. And you can use that for like a lot. Like, as I mentioned, anything that works with interaction with the world or other targets can use this system for great benefits. For example, one of Unity's own earlier demos of this was a character trying to hop on poles that are like over water, and making sure that the animation matches the landing of the character's feet on each of the poles perfectly, even though the leg wasn't on the root of the character. So this is a really fun thing to have when you know how to use it. Also, on that note,
That's a cool one. It might be fun to do a quick video on this, on how to use it, and maybe a poll.
Yeah.
It feels like one of those that put up a poll, and half the people will be like, "I never knew that existed. Now I'm going to start using it." So.
Yeah, so this works specifically best with humanoids, but if you're using generic objects, you don't have access to all the left hand, left foot, right foot, because generic rigs might not have that. But you can still use the root node for that. And usually when you have paired animations in games, the animation itself would have like a paired root game of bone that you can match together between the two actors, so you know that you're getting the exact thing if you're making them both target and the same one. It's like really useful.
Should we go on to the next Unreal thing?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm just running my mouth too much.
No, it's all good. There's a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah, so the next one, still talking about animations because it's kind of my shtick in here. I have a huge problem with Unity animations. I've been trying to solve it for years, and I'm just like drooling all over everything that Unreal is giving me right now. So the next one is animation mirroring, or mirroring animation specifically. That's going to be in the main 5.0 changelog.
I went one ahead too far.
Yeah. So animation mirroring, as simple as it sounds, lets you say these animations should be mirrored between these two sets of bones, and just flip them for me because I want to have the flipped animation. It's such a trivial concept, and yet it's missing from way too many features in way too many game engines. And Unreal made an impeccable implementation of it, if I may add. So specifically, it lets you, with code, set, I want to play this animation, but I want to mirror how it plays. So now you don't have to make the same animation twice, you can just make it once. And this has amazing benefits, like all across the board, like no matter what you're thinking about. I promise you there's another consideration you didn't think about regarding this. For example, one of the things in popular AAA games is that when a character runs and they stop running, the leg that was forward is the one that's going to do the stopping animation. So if you stopped on the right foot, you'll like lean into standing from the right foot being forward. And if you're on the left foot, it's going to be the left foot being forward. And that's a lot of work to set up animations-wise, because you're going to need double the animations for everything. Except this. If you have a mostly identical character animation, you can just straight up say, depending on the leg that's forward, play the stopping animation, but mirrored. And then you only have to construct one set of animations, but you get double the benefits of like everything being way more natural. And because you do this in code, they also let you know if you play the animation in a mirrored mode, so you can do special things. For example, if I'm telling the character to point their hand forward, do a finger gun, and shoot VFX, I can say that if the animation was flipped, the VFX should also play on a flipped origin, because I'm only swapping the bone positions, not where I'm VFXing or where I'm calling game object stuff. For example, if a weapon is equipped, then when I'm saying finish at the point of the animation where I'm drawing the weapon, snap the weapon to the left hand, I can't know if the animation is flipped unless I get a signal from the animation that's saying, yeah, it's flipped. Actually, do that with the right hand. It's a really good implementation of this, and I've been spending nights just dreaming about everything I can do with this if I had it in Unity.
Can you not do most of that with just the animator though, just by setting that mirror checkbox? Can you not do
Yeah,
that at
so
runtime? I've never tried to do it at runtime.
As far as I know, there were issues with that, and also you still can't get the nodes flipped. And there was also another thing with the animator being a pain in the ass to get things from. Like, did you ever try getting a specific node in the animator so you can flip it before doing anything with it?
Well, I've never tried to flip one, so.
Yeah, I mean, just
I think
getting
in that
one.
case, I don't know. I would probably end up just with an animator that had a blend or something between the two. I don't know.
Apparently,
It's
UFO
definitely
Driver
not as
said
easy,
that.
though.
Apparently, UFO Driver says that you can use the animation mirror in Unity with code. That said,
I haven't tried
still
it
not sure
myself.
if does animation mirroring in Unity work with generics at all?
I don't know.
No, wait. He's saying with layers and tags. Yeah, no, that flies way off the window. Layered animations are hell. It's like not worth the performance cost, and also the offering cost if you have to make double of everything. Yeah, it's a big topic, but it's worth discussing. It does worth mention though that Unity can do this. It's just way more extra steps to get it.
Yeah, you can definitely. There's the option on animations or in the animator to mirror a node, and then you would have to either do code to do it and see how well that works, or set up the animator to deal with it. But yeah, that's cool though. It's another cool feature. I feel like all of these things just need to be added in like 2022 or something. It's a bunch of cool little
Yeah, just like yesterday.
Just drop them in.
Yeah. God, it makes me remember that people are calling Leslie like Terraria we're updating for 10 years and people just call it lazy devs because they don't know where the next update is coming. When it's ready.
People entering the giveaway. By the way, before we jump on to the next topic, everybody, if you're watching live or not, just hit the thumbs up button and subscribe so that we know you're here, and say hello in chat. You can also enter the giveaway just by doing what everybody else is doing in chat or asking them. They'll tell you how to do it. So you want to go on to the next one?
Yeah, sure. So
switching to Unreal.
Yeah.
I'm not going that far, but they got some cool stuff.
I'm going to be experimenting with it really soon, as soon as I'm done with other life obligations. It's like I've been poring over the documentation because I don't have the free time to just sit at my PC and do things. So I'm like literally opening Unreal documentation and I'm like browsing through it when I'm not at home. It's like, oh, this system is fun and this system is interesting, and I didn't know this is going to have this problem, but now I do.
Yeah, and there's a comment in chat about saying a lot of these things. I think really a lot of these are quality of life features, which is kind of what you're talking about here. You briefly mentioned at the beginning that there were some really big things that are super flashy and got a lot of attention, like Nanite and Lumen and all that. And then there were lots of really cool quality of life type things that got put in and weren't really talked about. They were all kind of you could do them, but they weren't easy. And that's, I guess, really what we're kind of discussing here. So.
Yeah.
Does that kind of line up?
Yes, it lines up perfectly, and I just want to explicitly call it out. It's not that you can't do a lot of these things in Unity, it's just that it's going to take way more work, it's going to be manual, and it's not going to be worth it for the authoring experience that you're going to have. The entire point of being a good development program tool is that it's going to work for you. You don't need to think about all this complicated stuff. You're just throwing what you need in to get a solution that does what you want to end up with. This is why we're working with engines to begin with, and not just making the wheel over and over and over and over and over again. So
yeah, just drop that one node in and you're good to go.
Exactly.
Also, it's worth noting that a lot of the time when you read docs on stuff sounds a lot cooler and easier to use than it actually
True.
is. So you gotta try it out first and make sure you find out that like half the things don't work in your edge case or for your type of project. Not that that's necessarily the case on any of these, but whenever I used to get really excited about like big patch notes and release things, and then I was let down way too many times when I was like, oh, I can't actually use this, but it's cool. You gotta watch out for this.
I was literally, when I was discussing recording a video last night with Jason, I was having a huge rant in the server because the one thing I wanted to recommend to everyone to use in Unity suddenly didn't work with something really big. I guess it's worth talking about. Do we want to switch to Unity really quick about this?
Sure, yeah. We could talk about some Unity stuff and maybe jump back to some Unreal stuff in a little bit.
Yeah, so the topic at hand was the Unity search that got implemented in 2021.2 into the editor directly. Now, this search feature was started to have like a bunch of new stuff, and they're all legitimately great, except I ran into some issues with them. And basically, they seem to not work properly when you're trying to look for scriptable object properties. And I wanted to use that, the new search feature, to have a nice table of data. Because one of these search improvements was that you can now use queries like link and have them display neatly in the editor for you. So I could say, grab all the scriptable objects that are, say, candies in a Candy Crush game, and show me their color and how many points they're worth and their spawn rate as columns on a single table, which is something Unity didn't have conveniently before. Now, if you can just make a query and just like look at all the data in one single screen, and even make an editor window out of it, so that everybody can just open it, your game designers and whatever, and start typing in values, that would be incredible. Sadly, it doesn't work with scriptable objects. So it does work with game objects and mono behavior, specifically if you're looking for something in the scene and you're trying to make columns out of it. It seems to work perfectly fine. But when I'm trying to make it work with scriptable objects, it straight up gives me warnings and it doesn't update properly. And
what about prefabs?
I didn't try it. I was literally trying to make it work with scriptable objects, and when it didn't work and I figured out why it didn't work, I just like gave up, closed it down, tried to switch topics.
Did you happen to try 2022?
So I jumped to 2021.3, the LTS, which, being stable is supposed to work it out. Didn't change things, and then I tried to go to the 2022 Alpha 10. 2022.2 Alpha 10, and that didn't work there either. So I posted on the forums for this, which, by the way, this Unity search thing is actually a quick search plugin. It's a preview package, and they're just putting stable versions of it in the Unity editor integrated. So you can actually follow it in the beta and experimental features on the forums.
Okay, and I assume that didn't help either, though. It doesn't have support for it in those yet.
So I sent a question, but it was last night, so I didn't. I mean, being the weekend, I assume they don't have anyone to respond right now.
Nice. Okay. Well, that is cool. I've got to start digging into this. I didn't realize you could do this. This table creation.
Yeah, so
that's what this part is right here, right? They've got the description and
So you can put anything you want there. You can just make up a query, and it's just like a super simple piece of text. And then you can just include whatever you want. You specifically can say, like, from all the objects, where the objects have specific stuff I care about, show me them, and then show me their field. Yeah, it's exactly that. This. And it's similar to what Unity's Light Explorer does with the new European HDRP, where you can see like all your lights because you care about the composition. It's looking relatively similar. It's not the exact same. I compared the source code just to be sure, but you can do a lot with this if it worked properly. because
It looks
being
very
able
cool.
to see more than one object at once is like it's crucial for fast editing workflows.
Oh yeah.
Knowing to compare where the damage of your one sword between two other swords is, or where how much XP should one thing cost you, or whatever have you.
Yeah, it seems like this removes the need for a good amount of custom editor work if you can get it up and running properly.
Yeah. So specifically, I was looking into this because I wanted to compare like just what Unity has that Unreal doesn't, or how flexible they are. Unreal Engine has data tables where you can like construct a data table with whatever fields you need, and then you can see them all. But it gets a bit problematic to hide things there and show them. And in Unity, they now have this search. So you can make queries to have the data tables for whatever you want. You can save them, and then you can load them, and you can even group them. So you can have like any single table that you want to see, and you can even make your own with code and then open them up and see whatever you want in them, and call custom callbacks. Great potential.
Got added. Search context. Have you guys seen this?
Yeah,
that attribute. Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah, I explicitly called it out a while back, and I wanted to make my tip video specifically about this one.
Nice.
But because it didn't work with sketchable objects, I had to throw it out of the window.
That's too bad.
Yeah, and this is for everybody who doesn't have the video on it, search context attribute. Looks like it just lets you filter your search so that when you hit the little circle to find an object, it has a filtered search already there with like the file types that you might want, name stuff, it looks like, extensions, sizes.
With literally every single art asset in your project.
Yeah. So
go find the correct things.
And this is amazing specifically because you can make this do a lot more than just look things up for you. You can also count or search things. You can literally run math. It's a calculator for all the assets in your project. You can say, give me from all the available items in the game, the cost it would take to have all of them bought.
Oh.
You can literally run that query with just simple text. You don't need like a custom editor command to find all the assets in the project. You can literally just call it there. And it even has autocomplete. Now, I do want to call out, though, it's not entirely broken for scriptable objects. It's just that it's not responding properly, and it's throwing warnings literally every single time you click one of those. But other than that, it's really powerful. This thing is worth of like 5 videos on its own.
Yeah, it definitely looks worthy of doing a video because I haven't been using it. I feel like I should be. Like everybody should probably be using this. I'll drop a link in the chat as well for anybody who wants to go read about it in detail. It looks cool. Anything else on this the search thing other than it's semi-broken right now, but hopefully
again, it's only broken for specific things. If you're using it for scenes, mono behaviors, game objects, amazing.
It's just those scriptable objects where you're getting the problem, right?
Yeah, and it's just warnings and not updating properly. You basically have to hit Control S to save your changes every single time you're making something in order for the table to update. And I mean that alone is infuriating in its own right, but other than that, it works. It works. It's just I didn't feel in good confidence that I can like show about this if it doesn't work for the things that
one thing that you're trying to do with it.
Yeah, the one thing that I'm trying to do, because I'm trying to maintain good workflows, and as part of that, when we have data, I want to be able to have it like one data object per file, and then just showing them all in a neat interface that says, here are items that can be bought in a shop, here's how much gold they cost, and here's their benefits. You can easily see and balance that now, and I can even look up how much it costs to buy all of them. But it doesn't work with scriptable objects as I wanted it to, so
it's pain. You guys okay with jumping over to some other tool stuff? One of the things I wanted to talk about today was some of the tools that are on sale today. I was actually working on a video for some of the tools that I use that are on sale, and then I figured to go over some of the probably the coolest ones that are out there that people kind of recommend. But before I started recording it, I was like, wait a minute, I should probably just ask everybody too and get some feedback and some thoughts and see what everybody else has and like. So
Cool.
if it's okay with you guys, I'd love to just kind of go quickly over some of the ones that stood out to me and see if you guys have any feedback about them, or if there's anything that you guys think is interesting and worth talking about, or that you think people should grab. A lot of the ones that I have were because you guys recommended them. So if you guys have some other recommendations, I'd be curious. I'll drop the link in chat too for anybody who wants to keep up with it. So I think, if you guys all used Gaia before or any of the procedural world stuff?
Years ago, and I don't feel comfortable talking about it, but I basically gave up Unity Large Worlds when I saw Unreal.
Nice. What about Jason, Johnny? You guys ever played with it?
Not really, no.
Oh, okay.
I've played around, but yeah, nothing substantial. It was one of those ones which I assume, like most people, you get in an asset bundle or something and you try it out and you play with it for a week or two. But I've never used it in a project properly.
Oh,
so
okay. Yeah.
I do want to discuss a concept there that I think Gaia has, and even if it doesn't, like, it's really important to bring up. But basically, non-destructive workflows are really important when you're making like big things and you don't want to break them. And one of the things that I've seen and obsessed, and I think it was Gaia or one of these assets that was in this bundle that they have for the world creation stuff, was that as you're making a giant world and you're trying to carve out paths or have hills or try to have an island and you want to move it, a lot of these things tend to be really destructive actions in Unity default terrain. Like if you can't just cut and paste or move something without breaking everything that was around it. But there are workflows that have been introduced, specifically with stamps or textures that you can overlay over something, and then they modify the terrain. And if you want to move them, you just move where those were, but they're additive with everything else. So your terrain doesn't get cut out or weird or distorted. You're just moving one feature from one place to another. And that's called additive workflows, or rather non-destructive workflows. And in Unreal, they preached it for a few years now, and they've shown how they've used it. I think it was with Fortnite itself. But Unity had an asset to do that, and I think it's Gaia. Or the other one that they have, what's that other name? Jenna?
Oh yeah, the Geno one. I think Gaia does. I think that they both kind of work like that, where you set up those stamps and generate it all, and then the Geno one does the city and town generation on top of the terrain. So like separated into layers. One's setting up the actual just terrain parts, the world, the foliage and shit, and then the other one's doing towns, roads, and connections and all that. That makes sense.
Yeah, and also on the topic of the world building bundle, they also had Sector, which I think you worked with, Jason, right?
I've played with it a little bit. I don't know if Jason did you use it too?
Yeah, there was one or two projects we used it in. It was a long time ago. Sector's been around for, well, since I've started using Unity, it's been there. So it's been quite a while. But yeah, there was projects I've worked on that have actively used Sector, and it's very good. It's pretty it requires a lot of setup, and you have to sort of lean into how it works. Specifically, for example, they use their own solution for like doorways and regions, and so your entire scene is going to be littered with sector-shaped bounds and collisions and doorways and stuff. But if you're willing to lean in, the things you get for that is massive, because it doesn't just do the sector level streaming. Once you've got the concept of boundaries and then collision blocks and where the sight lines are and where doorways are, you can then like funnel things through its audio systems and things to get really nice reverb and have occlusion of your sound. And it's pretty much like a base layer of annotating your scene with sector related stuff, and it's very powerful beyond that point. But yeah, we just found that it's great if you know from day one that's the kind of project you're making, but it's kind of a bit tedious to go back later and then try to sectorize things, and now you've got like a lot of work ahead of you.
Yeah, so that's that for world building, I guess.
Yeah, it's cool. I've got them all. I don't have them on this account though. It's interesting. It was weird. I forget which account I've got. I got way too many Unity accounts. There were some other ones. There's a lot of stuff in here I remember looking at and kind of thinking I wanted to talk about, but there were a couple I wanted to ask you guys about, and I thought would kind of be interesting. Oh, anybody want to just talk real quick about Puppet Master and what it does?
Yeah, sure.
Anybody a big fan and want to just mention it?
So I haven't used it actively myself, but I am fan of the technology. So basically, Puppet Master is trying to drive a physical body to match the animation of your character, so that it can be affected by the world by a limb offset, as it were. Basically, when you're making standard game characters, you'll usually just have the capsule for the entire character's collision, and when you're trying to run around and interact with things, you're just going to have basic primitive shapes. But if you want the character to ragdoll and come back to life, Unity doesn't have anything built in for that for you. You can only just release the ragdoll to drop down the character, or you can fall down. What Puppet Master does is it lets you choose how much each of them should be, and tries to force the character to go back into the intended animation. So basically, it's always in ragdoll mode, but this ragdoll is alive and trying to act like the normal character. And this lets you do things like drop a boulder on its head and have it change the head specifically physically to match how the boulder hit it. So depending on the direction, depending on the offset, if it also hit the chest, it can move the entire character's chest back, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, well, what we mostly used it for is you can do raycast collision checks against the active ragdoll, and that lets you fire a ray and add forces like you would with the standard rigid body forces. So, long story short, we had a little VR game at one stage where you fire a gun at various monsters that are kind of bipedal, and they would actually have the shoulder knockback and buffets from the hits that you hit them with, and it's very satisfying. And because you get the same level of raycast information that you would from a normal hit, you also get the exact point of the normal, so you can have blood squirt at the exact moment and stuff, and it can be very it can make something feel very tangible and in the world. And when they fall back, we had very tall creatures, and when they fall back, that their whole body would fall flat, and you'd have that sort of toppling a giant look because the whole body sort of collapses back. So it gives a lot of realism to the motion of stuff. It does still have the same ragdolling problems that a lot of ragdoll systems have, which is you can go from lying down to standing up, and you can have a climbing back up animation, but they do still have the occasional jankiness where it vibrates or wobbles a bit, or it'll collision clip to the ground, depending on how complicated you want your collision checks to be on the ragdoll. But I would say it in general makes a project better rather than worse, right? There's a lot of really good benefits to it.
Yeah, I mean, if you can pay the performance cost, it's a great feature.
Yeah, it is really cool in VR, like you were saying too. That's the last time I used it. It makes the characters look really cool when they take a hit or when they fall or just animate properly. The other one I wanted to mention that's up here right now is this Eddie's vehicle physics. I haven't used this one in a long time, but I used it once for an interview and it was really cool. I thought it was a really neat pack for building out just a car racing game. It simulated cars pretty well and it was pretty easy to make it. So you could set up AI bots with cars and have them all just kind of work. There you go. Same kind of well, yeah, I guess they do bus jumping physics and stuff too. But I really liked this one when I played with it before, so I just figured I would
I
mention
remember it
that.
was really easy to set up. That
What's
was
that?
one that I remember that one was very easy to set up. That was one that out of the box, I remember you could basically find other car models and set up the wheels, and as long as you separated the wheel meshes, you could pretty quickly go pick any model car and make it work and tweak your settings for the forces and things, which was the various friction levels. It was pretty good. I remember, again, I did something similar. I think I used it for a little demo racing thing for a project a while back, but I was amazed. More than most other assets you get and try to do a quick test with, I was up and running with my basic idea in an hour rather than the usual, clawing your hair out trying to find the get the asset to work for your project kind of thing.
I'm sure it's better than Unity's wheel collider anyways, so
yeah.
You guys just gave it force. It's add force or set engine power, turn the engine power up and the car would start driving. I could adjust the steering and it would steer. And it's all right, all I gotta do is write the code that hits the throttle and steers now. Seemed like an easy one to do, and it actually worked out pretty well. Oh, what is this?
Nice. Yeah, so I once upon a time had an episode where I wanted to have vehicles like GTA, specifically because when I was little, my brother gave me GTA San Andreas with mods, and one of those was like a super quick motorcycle that would just literally send me off flying into like any single point of like elevation, and I really wanted to replicate that, but with VFX in Unity. And I'm going to look up the best way to do moving objects in Unity so I can drive nicely. And I started looking at every single moving vehicle project on the asset store, and also on the Unity3D Twitter. Not Twitter, Reddit. What the hell am I saying? And basically there I found this. This game developer is making the most advanced solution I've ever seen for car gameplay. There's like the whole deformation that you see there, and it's using like all the latest tech. He has a showcase of how well it performs with moving platforms or rotating platforms on the individual parts of the vehicle. It's like this entire thing is worth watching in its entirety, this entire channel. Studio Tatsu. So I just wanted to bring it up because there's a lot of nuances to how this system works, and he actually compares, I think it's him that compares it to all the other existing assets, just to see what he does better or less from them. So yeah, there are a lot of features to consider depending on what kind of game you're trying to make, but generally speaking, all the assets on sale are on the good end of this.
Oh, that video is crazy. Somebody mentioned a minute ago that they got the that Eddie's car physics working with Fishnet too. I'll have to talk about Fishnet in a little bit. I did a video on that yesterday. It was a lot of fun.
And
Johnny,
this is a
before
good
we go-
sign because yeah, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I just wanted to say this is a good sign because, replication is a really complicated topic. So if you can replicate all the necessary fields without a lot of component bureaucracy, then it's a sign of good code and a powerful tool to have.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm kind of curious to see what that's like. You should make a video showing the multiplayer car physics stuff going. There was a question, Johnny. I figured maybe you could answer this before we jump into another asset. And it's they're thinking about making and marketing some DOTS scripts, but think it might be too niche since DOTS appeals to mainly simulation stuff and strategy. Was that something you would say is accurate? Do you think people should be making and marketing DOTS stuff, like putting up some DOTS assets? I know one of the things
like
I wanted
tools
to
and
ask
things
you
on
about
the
was
asset store.
What's it, .net or
.net?
.net. Was this one right here? Is there demand for this kind of stuff for DOTS related tooling and scripts and stuff, or?
Yeah, I mean, like he says, it definitely is like very niche right now. I know the .net, this does have like a very active community, and I feel like the people who are into that thing, they're like very very hardcore into it. So you might kind of have like a kind of a passionate fan base, I guess. But yeah, I mean, as of right now, Unity says they're like the people who should be using DOTS are the people who are like already experienced Unity developers who are kind of running into the limits of the Unity game engine, and they really want to extend out that performance. And yeah, so as of right now, it's definitely you have to really know what you're doing and kind of like know some of the issues about the Unity engine, and yeah, so it is kind of niche in that sense.
But this one still seems relatively popular, right? It's like
yeah,
I said,
yeah.
16 reviews, 809 favorites. Lots of people are interested in it, but I guess it's still being bought.
Yeah, I know they have like a Discord that's pretty active with the people in there, and yeah, this .net in particular, it's created by the same people who use or who created Mirror, and yeah, I mean, if you're making like a DOTS multiplayer game, this is the one that I typically recommend to people. We can talk about the Unity's kind of DOTS networking solution a little bit later, maybe, but yeah, I think this is a good, easy enough solution to kind of get you up and running with some basic DOTS networking. It's, you know, pretty intuitive. You kind of just like drop like authoring components onto game objects like you would, and then basically make those networked entities. And then, you know, it kind of gives you some attributes that you can add to your code. So you can say, you know, I want this system to run on the server. I want this system to run on the client, or, you know, this should be a server and client system. So it's a good solution.
Nice. Yeah, I think just to go back to the question, that I would probably consider it. I'm always a big fan of like jumping into newer tech and tools and markets for this kind of stuff where there's not already a bunch of solutions. You'll probably find that there are lots of problems like not having a networking stack that you can make a solution to, and that you can probably, you know, crank out relatively quickly. As the thing matures and gets built up more, then the barrier to entry on that is going to go up and up in the amount of, you know, work that you've got to do to compete, because there will be other things solving the problem. So I would just jump in and give it a try, especially
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like to like stray this person away, because, you know, obviously my channel is like, you know, all about the dots and ECS stuff.
Oh, yeah. I
But
think you're
yeah,
just
you know,
saying it's less
it is
popular than
very
the non-dots, right?
I'm just kind of like, you know, being honest, where it's, you know, it is very niche right now. It's you know, appeals to the more, you know, hardcore programmers, simulation devs, like you say. But you know, they are kind of like working on you know, like making it more accessible to people. And so yeah, it's something that I think will definitely grow and you know, over time.
So the answer is a yes, a big fat yes.
I
If
do
you're
want
into
to
it,
add
we
a
can make
bit
some
to
cool,
this.
yeah.
So specifically, you earlier mentioned that it's people who are running into problems with Unity on the performance end, but there's also the consideration that DOTS opens up an entire new world of possibilities with how you get separate world instances. So now you can have this instance dungeon that I talked about earlier. You can literally have a fourth dimension to your game. You can have an infinite amount of worlds running it parallel. You can also run multiplayer in the editor at the same time for multiple clients.
Yeah.
Which is one of the big benefits with DOTS. And there's also another popular asset from the maker of the kinematic character controller that Jason and I use a lot, which is the Rivals project. And also some other things for advanced flocking with Flockbox dots. They're starting to crop up. And in my own opinion, it's entirely worth it, because even though the audience is smaller right now, they're also extremely passionate, and you can ask them for what they need. DOTS has effectively nothing, with quotes, compared to what Unity mono behaviors have. Like, you have hundreds of tools on the store just for mono behaviors, but the majority of them will not be able to deliver on a DOTS project. So you can effectively just look at any popular asset there, and if it doesn't work with DOTS out of the box, you can make the asset for DOTS. It's basically a gigantic opportunity market right now for anyone who's willing to do that, in my own opinion. And like, because there is no competition, you have a higher chance of success with minimum viable products, and, you know, letting them expand. And because people won't be able to find any alternative but what you put up, then your asset will be having the opportunity to grow to one of these big ones when DOTS finally gets adopted, if it gets to 1.0 eventually, hopefully.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely make it. I want to ask you guys about two other assets that are on this page, though. See if you or I, Jason, or Johnny, anybody's got some thoughts on them. One was the imposters, and there's this one, but there's also, I think there was one other that's on sale. Another
The
one
imposters
does something similar.
Just check if it's Amplify.
I believe it was the Amplify one that was on sale.
Yes, it is.
There were two different imposter packages out there that were on sale, from what I remember.
Yeah. So
thoughts. You guys want to tell everybody what this is, and do you use the imposters in any of your projects? Do you care about them? Is it something anybody should care about?
I've only used the Amplify one, and it's great. I've used it in a couple of projects, and it's not again, as we said earlier, these kinds of things aren't a magic bullet. It won't solve everything, but for certain use cases and certain kinds of assets, it's phenomenal performance benefits.
Yeah, so to put it in a bit more concrete context, Amplify is amazing and everyone should be using it. And if you're not using it, you're wasting performance, especially if you have things off in a distance. It's an essential tool for saving resources in game development in general, and you should be familiar with the technique even if you're not using it. Like, straight up. So does anybody else want to try and explain this, or?
Sure. So, I mean, it's we looked at a lot of nanite stuff last week, right? That kind of like automatically LODs stuff down and actually like generates meshes that can be dynamically LOD'd. And this is somewhat similar effect, totally different way that they go about doing it though. And essentially takes pictures of your 3D objects, your large 3D objects that are far away, and then converts them into smaller quads, smaller triangles, little objects that show up, so that instead of rendering some, like you can see on the image here, a 27,000 triangle rock here, you can use 6 triangles, just show two little flat images of those things. From far enough away, you're not going to notice it. The perspective isn't changing. And then those can update dynamically and be pictures from other sides. So as the camera view changes, it can be a view from another angle, essentially.
Yeah, that might be worth drawing a line between the 3 different comparatives here. But when we're talking about LODs, billboarding, and something like an imposter, if you start with the basic concept of a model, you're probably going to want to show something in your scene. You draw it. You're drawing all of the physical shape and geometry that's there, and that's where the cost comes in. Each individual triangle that makes up all the surfaces and faces. But like in real life, as stuff goes off further into the distance, you see less of it. You see less details. And so the idea at its core is when something doesn't need to be detailed, you can do lots of different things to show less of it or show less information. The question becomes, how do you want to go about doing that? The first stage might be something like LODs, where you would make different levels of detail, where the model would change between being very complicated to somewhat complicated, even less complicated, until it's basically something that might have a lot of geometry will suddenly be like just a couple of shapes. And that works, but you have to either author all of those yourself or use a generation tool to generate each one, and you're still having a load of different assets in the project. That works really well, though, in scenarios where something is still going to be predominantly close, where it's still within like the foreground portions of what you're working with. You just want it to be like less detailed at certain distances. Imposters, on the other hand, well, actually, we'll go to billboards. Billboarding is so much cheaper by like an immeasurable amount, because if you think about it, it's like with grass. The way you do it is you just, whatever it is you want to show, you show a picture, and the picture orients itself to face you, the camera. And so no matter which way you walk around, you'll never see the back side of it, which means the amount of information you need is already cut in half. It's only the front of it. And in a lot of cases, if you don't have perspective and angles because it looks at you, you can have literally just one surface face, which is why they're basically a quad or a plane. And so that works really well. But the trade-off for that one, as you've seen this yourself in many games, you've ever done that thing where you've looked at a plant or some kind of grass and you've walked in circles and it looks like it's stalking you and it's like following you around the scene? That's the problem. It has this weird, like, because as you walk forward, it rotates and looks at you. And so it starts to get very noticeable when its angles are changing. Not a big deal for like thousands of blades of grass or something, but it's not quite as nice visually. And so we get to the idea of, what if you take that same principle, but rather than doing it and have it constantly face the camera, what if the objects are so big and so far away that your perspective angle to them is probably not even going to be changing that much? You could literally walk around a large area and the thing in the distance is still roughly the same shape, size, and angle. And so you won't notice that billboarding as much. And then if you want to go one step further, why not do one billboard? Why not have multiple billboards? So that's where, as Jason was saying, you take a model and you take photographs of it multiple sides, kind of like you would if you were 3D scanning something in, and you then build like multiple shapes. You end up with a billboard for each perspective. So you could basically put a giant tower in the middle of a game, and depending on which side of the island you're on, you'll see a different one of these billboarding shapes. And so that's what the concept of an imposter is. It's basically something which looks like the thing that you want, but is like basically considerably smaller in size. And we're not talking like 10% increases here. We're talking vast increases, because they are fundamentally no longer using all the geometry and all that complexity. And also anything which is live interactive shader effects and things, an image won't have those. Obviously, you can't animate it in the same way, and you get into kind of interesting territory. But as a general rule, if something is is complicated and has a lot of stuff applied to it. If it's going to be in the distance anyway, it can just be a picture. But yeah, anyway, I think it is definitely a really powerful feature, and there's a lot of different solutions to it, but it basically boils down to cutting down to geometry the further back you get.
Spoken once again. Generally speaking, though, there are some small caveats when you're trying to work with imposters, which is because you lose the geometry detail when you're trying to, say, author specific shader effects. Depending on this geometry detail, you lose them. So basically, the imposters tend to come with fallback shaders, which are simplified. They don't have this information, or the imposters themselves bake the information into a texture to draw on the billboard, and you get the information from texture instead of the geometry. It's an entire topic because one of the most popular things to billboard is trees and bushes and any foliage. But games tend to pigmentize them, draw them with colors depending on where they are, or the season, or the time. So you can't get this information from the model anymore. You have to get it from the texture. But this lets you, if you construct your shader properly, you can use the same shader with the big model and the small model and get all those fun features with an imposter that doesn't take away the performance of the bazillion blades of grass and trees and everything you want to add. If you look at Genshin Impact specifically and you try to run up to things that in the distance, they gradually shift shapes into higher and higher detailed versions of themselves as you get closer. It's really fun to see in games. Well, I mean, if you ignore the part of the magic is not noticing when you see the transitions.
Nice. Oh, yeah, this is one I'm going to check out. I don't know if you guys have. You said you've only used the Amplify one.
Yep.
And somebody mentioned that this one does it dynamically too. I'm curious how it compares. I've only used the Amplify one too, so I'm kind of curious to checking this one out.
Just in that notion, I linked you a blog post of one of my friends who worked on a Europe project for quite a while, and he ended up using Amplify Imposters in that. And he claimed that it's only 3 clicks per thing you want to imposterize, and then you can straight up drop the imposter prefab into the world and not have any issues.
Nice.
I also will say on a personal level, this is just a general debate in this stuff. I know it may be a weird thing to say, but personally, I don't like when those kinds of things are pushed to the runtime parts of the project. At the end of the day, there's stuff that's about performance and there's stuff that's about the experience. And bad imposters fundamentally will make your game look bad. It'll just be very noticeable and it'll ruin the experience you're going for. And on top of that, it's not something you have to do all of the time. It's like you do it for models that make sense in the context you're using and for certain things. I think, and this is just a general philosophy of working in a game engine, if you can front load the effort on your end as a developer so that the runtime is faster, you're not building and composing a lot of information at the start of a game, the game itself will run faster. And at the end of the day, you're making a game. So for me, even if you do say this thing supports runtime or automated whatever, I prefer to take the time to do stuff. It may be a minority opinion, but for a lot of things, I'll happily go through and slowly label my assets and tag things and go through processes and make pre-build steps because I want to do as much of the binding and hookup at build time before the project.
I think the use case there was different though. The reason that it was runtime was so that you could get the imposter from any angle, like moving the camera around dynamically, get around to the back of it and have it generate those without having to do them at every LOD from every angle. And then it was just doing it the first time it was seen, it would do it in capture. But I don't know. Like I said, I haven't actually played
either way, they tend to be roughly the same. They'll all take roughly the same, whatever 8 angles of photo, and you'll end up building some kind of.
There is one gigantic difference though. If you can take the pictures at runtime, you can let the player customize a variation of what they want, and then you can imposterize that. So if, say, for the recent Saints Row game that they're showing, you can customize the base of the character stays. You can change how it looks, the shapes and others. And if you have a lot of combinations of parts you can have for that base, and you want to be able to see it from afar, or you have multiples of it, you could imposterize that and then use that combined thing. Depending on how many things you have, even 10 by 10 pieces, you're going to need 100 variations. It's not worth to have every single one as your content amount grows. So dynamic imposters do have a benefit. I do agree with you, though, that doing it when you can, when it's reasonable, is way better.
Yeah, and on the one of the comments was about RTSs and things. Yes, obviously it's certain camera angles and certain things will affect what you're doing. But honestly, if you're authoring models for an RTS, you're actually authoring them differently anyway in general, because if you make a model and you want to put it in a scene, you are going to be cutting out any information you don't need. Like something you don't think about is if you make a staircase, is there ever a scenario if that staircase is embedded into the wall or something that you're going to see the underside of those steps? Probably not. So you're going to cut those. That geometry out. And so when it comes to RTSs, a lot of the model is actually constantly not in sight. Like from certain camera angles, if it's a locked camera angle, you can actually have the entire bottoms and backs of a lot of those models cut out, and it's far better for performance. So yeah, in an RTS style scenario, you'll be doing very different authoring of your assets anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much from that perspective.
Yeah, totally agree. Have you guys used this Megafires one? This was another one that stood out to me, and I've been looking at it a lot and wanting to grab it, but I haven't found an actual use for it other than it looks really, really cool. I was curious if you guys have played with it or used it at all.
I have not, but I do have a lot of use cases for it. I do own it. I just never bothered to actually get to those use cases. So specifically, the entire point with things that can be magnified, like stretched, all that, is the toony behavior of it. And it particularly works well even in physical projects when you're working with dynamic blobs, slime monsters. One of the favorite action games I have has like these slime monsters that like will literally squish and stretch and do all of that. But some of them do this dynamically. Like when you hit them, they will wobble in the direction that you hit them. And you could do this with dynamic bones, but this looks like a way richer solution. So you could say like if you want to make a spinning attack where they squeeze themselves instead of like, there's a lot of potential to doing this with a dynamic approach versus bones and praying that you rigged it properly and that you have enough vertices for it.
So what about Johnny, Jason? You guys use this? I'm getting inspired every time I look at this. I get ideas.
Pretty much every one of their assets is crazy. I don't think I've used this one, but like almost every asset from these guys are kind of crazy cool.
Cool. Well, that's one I'm probably going to end up grabbing and just experimenting with and see what I can come up with. My solution or use will probably be less cool than your eyes, though. Realistically, it'll probably be something relatively boring, but I want to try it out anyway because I think maybe it'll make something look cool. There were a couple other ones. Let me see if there's anything. Did you guys have anything that was on the list that you thought was really cool and worth talking about? Or that obfuscator. We talked about obfuscation stuff, so I wanted to bring this one up, right? We talked about whether or not you should obfuscate it, whether you need to hide your code and all that. And then I noticed that this popped up and just kind of makes it easy. You guys got thoughts on code obfuscation, preventing people from reading your data and code?
Don't. Generally speaking, if you need the advice, you've already lost the battle, because if you're working in a big project, there's already going to be experts who know what they're doing with this. If you're not, all it does is making sure that if your game stays not popular, it's also going to be staying uncheated. But if people want to dive into your game with other angles, why not? Unless it's majorly competitive, and then in that case you just want server authentication and stuff. Like it's a complicated what if, but basically I tend to think that if people want to be able to mod your game, adjust it, and do whatever, it's better to let them do that and let your game breathe more life into itself than to try and hide away any possible change just for the sake of a single board or something. Generally speaking, though, I don't play much of competitive games competitively, so take that with a grain of salt.
I mean, it's in the name, right? Like a lot of people look at it and they're, should I obfuscate my game? Well, it's the word obfuscate. It's not protect code or anything along those lines. Obfuscate just means to make it harder. And so the harsh truth of the matter is, if somebody wants to steal your code or look at what you're doing, smart people know how to do it. And if the whole point is, if your game has gotten popular, the more popular it is, the more likely someone will want to do it, and the more likely a talented person will find a way to do it. So the truth is, I can't think of a single scenario for people who's a good candidate for this. Either no one cares about your game and they're going to try to do anything bad with it, or it is popular and then people will figure it out anyway. Yes, you'll make it slightly harder, but the example that comes from, like Minecraft. Minecraft was obfuscated. I mean, I think we somehow found a way to mod that a long time ago, right? Like that's one of the most modded games in the world. It's just one of those things where if you're curious about what it kind of really does, imagine you had your kitchen and you had all the ingredients and you were making a cake, and you put all the ingredients together and you're mixing it and you make a cake and whatever, and someone else wants to use your kitchen, but you want to make it harder for them to make food in there. You could label the salt a bunch of random letters, and then everywhere in your recipes books, you replace the word salt with the same matching random letters. So the recipe's still the same, like, you know, a spoon of blah, a whatever spoon of gibberish, all these different words with amounts beside it. But now you'd have to go and look up the entire sea of ingredients in your kitchen and find the matching name to match the thing and try to tie it up together. It just makes the whole thing confusing and complicated. Which again, like, it serves its purpose. If you want someone to look at your code and not really know what it's doing, it's possible. But either way, someone can go through it and like ruin your, like, you know, reverse engineer it back if they want to. So I've never found a scenario where it's super valuable. It always feels like something paranoid people will do. But like, again, as Yorai said, if you're at the point where you're considering it because you hadn't thought of it before, it's because someone's already gone and done the work. Like, you're not, it's too late at that stage. And even if by then all you'll do is like buy yourself a month or two of time, if you're making your game kind of hard to decompile, and it has a negative effect on modders and people trying to work with your code. And the truth is, we live in a parasocial world. Having people want to play with and mess with your code and put in characters from other games and things is probably more of a benefit than anything you'll save from making it harder for people to mess with your game.
There is one scenario where I would obfuscate the code. I just want to call it out, and that's if I was building, working on an MMO or something where it's mostly a server authenticated game where majority of stuff's on the server. I don't want them screwing with the client, and I don't want them getting any hints or clues on stuff from the client. So it's not so much about it is largely about making it harder, making it so that it's not easy. Because if you write the code and you don't obfuscate it and it's something like that, and there is any sort of issue or bug in the code, it's going to be a lot easier for them to find it. So at the very least, it will reduce the chance of people finding ways to attack and exploit your server. If it's really easy for them to see like where and how every message is sent and what that message looks like and all of the data really obviously and easily, then it's a lot easier for them to get in and start attacking the servers and trying to hack and stuff. So in that case, I would obfuscate on the release versions of those. Of course, you still have the chance that the stuff gets out in the wild, and eventually people will figure it out, but it will slow that down and not really cost you anything because you don't want people getting in there in the first place, assuming that there's no harm to you on that. But that's pretty much
as a general rule. Yeah, as a general rule, if it's competitive multiplayer, you do want to basically make everything harder that could be detrimental to your game. But there's other stuff that you're probably not thinking about already that's causing you issues. Like, for example, there's a checkbox for debug build in Unity. And if you make a debug build, you're including things like the PDB files. And what you've done there is you've given people, when an exception or something is thrown, the exact stack trace and order of the operations of what was called. That's a lot more information than just a normal build. So there's already
writing out the debug logs, right, and adding those in there. It's easy.
Yeah, they can see all the logs and stuff. Yeah, so it's worth noting that there is already a lot of this stuff. If you're at that point, with a big game that's multiplayer and needs to be very cautious about it, there's other things to consider, I think, that are higher up the food chain for security reasons. Than
and obfuscation would just be a small part of what.
Yeah, it would be an additional thing. Yeah.
So there was a super chat question about Mesh Slicer and Dino Fracture. They were wondering if Rayfire would be better than both of them. Rayfire is actually one of the ones I wanted to talk about. I've used it before and it was pretty damn cool. Have you guys used this? It's for doing the fracturing and destruction stuff, shattering, I guess.
I have not.
I used Destruction for Unity years ago. That was a much older one. I haven't used this one.
Yeah, this one
Code
was
Monkey did a
this one
video
was
on
cool
it.
years ago when I used it. I assume it's even better now though. It just let you do essentially fractures, and oh yeah, it looks like it's gotten even better. But you could build up fracturable buildings and then just essentially turn it on so that they could start fracturing and falling apart. Make it so you could rip pieces apart. We made a Rampage style VR game using this. So just pre-fracture all the buildings, have chunks that you could just rip out and throw and tear and have it just work. But you can do it. I think you can do it dynamically at runtime as well. I'm not 100% sure. We didn't there because it didn't make sense. But you guys never use this, or did you say you had, Jason?
I used a different asset a long time ago. There was another one called, I think it was literally called Destruction for Unity. It was quite an older version of it. But I've used other destruction solutions. I've not used Rayfire specifically.
Okay. Yeah. If anybody
We
in
should
chat has
probably-
thoughts, let us know.
You should probably give it a description of what, fractured meshing is doing or how it works, and the fun concept of interfaces and textures for that and stuff.
The fun concept, you say. I recall as I go into the hell that is trying to figure out how to slice a mesh into multiple ones and figuring out how to change the UV so I can have an internal texture for the things that you cut.
Show the insides.
Yeah, so in general, mesh fracturing tends to be that you have an object. It's constructed by triangles in 3D space. And when you want that object to be split into smaller objects, you can't because there isn't information there. Those fracture projects that you can buy from the asset store say, well, give me the mesh. I will make smaller meshes for you with it's where you want them to. And I'll even let you decide on styles and different variations of it. And I'm going to make sure that when you're using that, the performance is going to be okay in your game. Because if you split a cube into a million tiny cubes, that's going to have a performance cost. You don't get a million rectangles for triangles for free, and you also don't get a million moving objects for free. So these kinds of things have a lot of optimization steps that you can take, and these assets try to give you a single-click solution that gives you both the fracturing and optimization and the usability with the rest of your game all at once. You can do this in Blender, but you won't get those usability nitpicks, and you can use this in Unity, and you will get them, but it's going to work specifically with the solution you made for it. So take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, so a general sort of look at how this tends to work out is you'd have your shape of whatever it is, a lamppost or a building or something, and you take your model, and then what you do is you apply some kind of fracturing algorithm. A classic one is Verneuil, and it's basically will create a pattern that like chunks shapes out of something, or you can manually create your slices and then create smaller sub pieces out of that. And then you might write some code that, for example, places a single mesh in the scene, but then when that mesh is hit and that first box collider is hit, you would swap it out for the single pieces, and then you would explode them or throw the pieces around or that kind of thing. What we were alluding to earlier is if I was to take a shape that's like a cube and I was to slice at the middle of it, and you've never seen the inside before, what does that inside look like? Well, in game terms, it's basically, not only is it not there, it actually has no physical faces or geometry, and so it'll look like it disappears. It looks like you've flipped it over and the whole thing will disappear. So you need to physically put geometry there, and then when you do, what does it look like? If I have something made of wood and I cut it in half, what does the inside look like? Or what if I had an apple and I cut it in half, what does the inside look like? Well, by default, if you have an apple and you cut it in half in a game engine style scenario, it'll just try to take the outside apple texture and put it in the inside. And now that'll look really weird because it'll just be a big red smear on the inside, not what you expect. So not only do you have to deal with the fracturing of the objects, there's extra fun in figuring out what does the inside geometry now look like for each of these slices and what kind of texture. So as a general rule, people tend to cheat and have sort of like an inside texture that's just a generic one that applies to all things. And then you can also, to limit down on the amount of pieces, you can also hack a little bit by having large chunks fractured, but then spawn a particle system that has matching shapes and colors and things to add a bit more variety without having to build extra geometry, because it's not usually worth having a lot of tiny pieces. The benefits of the geometry is that you can do fun things with it, like pick it up and throw it around. And the performance costs of having millions of little tiny chunks of something is probably not very valuable. As a general rule, you probably want to keep your fracturing down from one big shape to 2 to 5 smaller shapes, and then those 2 to 5 smaller shapes, maybe they might even fracture 1 or 2 times more. But beyond that point, you usually don't want to go too far. Depends on what you're doing, and there are simulation type things that can get quite complicated and interesting. But if you're talking about it from a game perspective, this example you're seeing here looks very cool, but like in realistic terms, most games, the fracturing should serve a gameplay purpose. You should be like shooting a hole in a wall that has like a dedicated, creates a gap large enough for you to jump through, right? Like a lot of this is faked in a way that makes it valuable for gameplay.
Yeah, and also to put a bit of a highlight on that, most games will not want a bazillion interactions with the same object if it doesn't deliver value. Like it can literally disrupt gameplay. For example, in Dark Souls, objects will fracture in one hit into the whole blown out object because there is no point in letting them survive multiple hits. That door that survives is apparently a design decision based on some enemies behind it. So it's just one door. It's not the rest of the game having secrets like that. But yeah, so
everyone knows about the manor door, yeah. The manor wall.
So basically speaking, if you're trying to make a game that has purpose for hitting everything, yeah, this asset is great for you because it's going to save a bunch of work and it's going to let you have a really nice fracturing world. But do consider how many times you split each of the objects and how much do you care about it. There's also the whole concept of if you want the object to be pre-sliced, but when you hit, only the slices that you hit fly off, then now you have to construct this entire physical structure that like things hold together each other, or you end up with a case with like 3 cubes, and if you hit the middle it flies out, but the top one is floating now. So there's this, it's a whole complicated topic. These assets try to solve that for you when they construct everything.
So Johnny just sent me something cool. I got to pop up in a second. And yeah, I like Rayfire. So if you haven't tried it out and it's in your budget, I would definitely check it out. I wanted to ask you guys about Steam stuff though, because I think multiple of you guys have been playing with the Steam SDK stuff. Did you guys use one of the assets from the asset store, or do you just use like the stuff that Steam provides directly?
Specifically speaking, I only used steamworks.net because I work with Terraria and Terraria SXNA, so I can speak for the Steamworks complete package. But
I did use that. I specifically used that one.
So go ahead.
It's funny, like I used it, but I just found that a lot of the features in there I wasn't using. So it looks like it is going to be very powerful or useful, but at the end of the day, after I installed it and I was looking through it and playing with it, I realized that all I did was basically open up the scriptable asset settings, put in my API key, and then like use the surface level things like the achievements or the just a couple of small things. Long story short, half the work still has to be done on Steam. Like you can't do everything through any asset because the way Steam works is you have to log into the developer portal, and you have to go in and set up all your images and all your assets and all your stuff and register your achievements and register your settings and track information and stuff. So it looks very good and I see what it's doing, but it's not doing anything you couldn't realistically do yourself. And personally, I found myself not really using the features it's got there. I kind of realized in retrospect I could have just called an API and called 3 or 4 lines of code. That's not to say it's not a good asset. It's just I kind of realize unless you're actually going to be using a large chunk of what it has on display, it just feels like if you're just literally connecting for the sake of having Steam integration, you can do that much simpler.
So sure, if you just need like achievements and like account info, that's easy enough without the whole wrapper. I assume this is really just like a wrapper on top of Steam's libraries to make it a lot easier to use, right?
Yeah, it's basically editor tools that have like editor windows to let you assign and change certain values and things.
Do you want to talk about the Steamworks in general for a bit?
Sure.
So one thing that Jason highlighted perfectly is that Steamworks is mainly just a few calls on the developer end, but a lot of the actual content that you interact with through those calls has to be set up on Steam's website end. And this is because, let's take the scenario of achievements. You could tell the game, I want to have 5 achievements. Here are their icons, here is their description, and here is their name. If you did this only from your application game end, Steam Steam wouldn't know how those icons look until you actually gave it to it. So if nobody ever launched a game, how would it know to show that the game has achievements on the store before people buy it? You need it to be there beforehand. So sending it from your game every single time to Steam obviously is not a real solution to have. So you just log in and you set it all up perfectly by what Steam needs. So Steam can show it to everyone before you can even buy the game and then play it. And when you play, you don't want people to make up achievements. So this is another layer of guarantee. Because you're the only one who can set things up on the Steam end, people can just make up achievements and like say, I got 1,000 achievements from this 5 achievement game. Now, generally speaking, all of these things are really abstracted and simplified. Like, even if you're just trying to have an achievement on Steam, you're literally just calling unlock that achievement name key. And if it's running on value, say you need to kill 100 enemies and it's supposed to show a progress bar of 100 enemies, you can say, I have killed enemies 100. And it's going to handle all of that for you. If you're working on user-generated content, which Terraria did a resource packs system not long ago, and you can upload packs, download packs, and run them, all of what Steam does behind the background is Steam, the application itself, is going to manage the items you're subscribed to on the workshop. It's going to download files into a folder, and then on the game end, you just get a list of folders to find files from, and you can load them however you want. It's literally just telling you, here are the items that are subscribed and downloaded. And it also has some events for, hey, you finished downloading an item while the game is running. Do you want to do anything with it? Etc. etc.
It's also worth noting that's actually how Steam works as a general concept, is because it might be confusing at first to go, how does Steam support Unity games and other games from like Game Maker and other things? Well, at the end of the day, Steam's games are a folder of files and the one it wants to try to run. That's it. You basically define, this is the folder of files, this is the one file that runs, the exe or whatever it is, and then you can choose your arguments and parameters, and then once someone clicks on the button, literally all it's doing is trying to run that process. So it kind of inherently has support for anything that can be runnable by the operating system you're on, and that's why its SKUs are separated based on operating system platform, because you need to literally upload a bundle of files and say, run this one for this thing on this platform.
Steam's pretty damn awesome.
Yeah, and it's really simplified to the point where like even beginner programmers can probably use it properly. You can get a lot out of it. You can get like icons of your friends, so you can show their icons in the game. You can get files to upload if you made a folder by yourself. Like say somebody wants to put a pack of their screenshots, you can just say put his screenshots in this folder and then upload this folder to Steam by his name, please, and it'll literally just do that for you. And then you have an item on the workshop. It's way simpler than it looks on the conceptual end. If you want to do dynamic asset loading, that's a whole other topic, and that's based on your game engine. Just wanted to be clear there.
Yeah, they do a lot of stuff to try to optimize for you and make it easier. One of which is interesting is how they choose all of the capsule arts and things. So all of the images you see on the Steam store or on the library or whatever is something you author yourself, probably something like Photoshop, and then you upload your images up to Steam and then assign them to the various things. In a very interesting decision, I don't know if I like it or not, is every image is oddly enough a very specifically different resolution or different size. So it might be 720 by 685, or it might be 284 by 525 or something. Whatever it is, and what it does is when you upload a folder of images or various different images you've got, it will deduce which one to use where relative to the images that you've picked. So that means that they've made it simpler to make sure you assign the right ones to the right places, because it'll automatically say, oh, you've uploaded an image which is meant to be the capsule art image for this thing, or it's meant to be the banner image. And there's a lot, by the way. We're talking 35 unique images or so on the asset store for a single game. If you cover all of the cases where they have like, there's an icon, there's a banner, there's the portrait sized one, there's the landscape one, there's the logos, there's a whole lot of art to fill in. And that can be a little bit frustrating at first. They do have a lot of sample, it's like you can get the sizes, and there's also like a PDF with dimensions and things you can get online to help you with this stuff. Suffice it to say, none of this stuff is that complicated. In fact, even uploading the games to Steam, they have a dedicated Steam patching update tool that you can install separately on your machine. Drop files in, press a button, configure it, and then it'll automatically upload and stuff. It's got some quirks as well, but at the end of the day, a lot of working with Steam is not going to be as hard as you think it is. It's just going to end up being a little bit fiddly, for lack of a better word. You can't really do too much wrong, but there's a lot of tabs, a lot of configuration. You have to set up like prices and per regions, and like you'll spend a long time noodling around on their website, put it that way.
And then you got to submit it and get it rejected, and figure out what you missed, and then submit it and get it rejected. Who dropped? Johnny, you dropped this link.
Yeah. We were just talking about the like mesh deformation stuff, and it totally reminded me of this little Twitter thread that I came across. And actually, yeah, if you scroll down, it kind of goes through the steps of how this is made. Basically, you can see it's kind of a VR wood carving game. Yeah, actually, interesting enough, he does say that he uses the Unity jobs and burst compiler here. But yeah, he kind of walks through a bit, how it works. He, kind of slices the mesh and then, creates that little shaving part that kind of curls up. And then, yeah, it says, that the angle can be tweaked to, find the right amount of curl.
Very
so
satisfying.
see yeah. And then if you go down a little bit more, then he says or he actually changes the inside texture to be, a different color. And then, yeah, he applies it to other things like peeling a potato.
Nice.
All of this work is not trivial, by the way. There's a lot that goes into these kinds of things.
Yeah, no, it looks pretty in the 6 little Twitter gifs.
Import the asset.
Yeah, right. Copy,
actually
paste.
writing this stuff, yeah, I would just skip it. If I had to write this myself, I would just not do it and build something else. There was a question in chat about testing stuff, and I wanted to really quickly pop up Game Driver. So if they're looking at trying to test stuff in Unity, but from outside. So I thought I would at least mention this and make sure that everybody is aware of it. I'll drop the link down below too. But it allows you to just run Unity tests. You can add objects and components, write tests, and it all runs from outside of the Unity editor. So you can have it run on like your release builds and do the test and give you back the results and stuff. It's really cool stuff, and it's pretty damn simple to set up. So if you actually want to set up some test automation stuff for Unity, I'll go check it out. Get rid of it.
Cool. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. Jason and I talked to those guys at GDC.
Yeah, it was really cool. The demo that you showed was really neat too. You just set it up to run through and play your game or application. They do it for VR stuff too. He did mention, like, if you're doing the VR tests, don't wear the headset if you're going to be teleporting and spinning people. That's a bad idea. But overall, it's a really cool little framework to just make it so you can automate the testing without having to write unit tests. So you just find the game objects and control them like you would a normal player, I guess. Or not, I guess it's exactly what you do.
Yeah, maybe testing, like describing this process, why it's valuable, and comparing it to different kinds of tests might be an interesting topic.
Goes on.
Anybody want to talk about it briefly, or do you guys want to save that for a different day?
I'm good either way.
Jason?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I just find testing an interesting topic. I guess. I guess we'll start with most. Okay, say you're doing literally anything at all. Whether you're trying to make something for the first time, you want to make sure it works. You want to try it out and make sure that it does what you expect it to do. The thing about software is we're writing rules. Software at its core is basically defining a rule and writing it in code. If this happens, do this thing. If you don't have enough money, can't buy the thing. If you do have enough money, you can buy the thing. And so if you want to test that, the kind of classic human way to test this is to take the finished product, click it, open it, type in the thing, and press the button and see what happens. And that's very, very time consuming. And the benefit of writing code is that because it's a rule, we can check if the rule passes or fails. So what you can do is you can write tests which will run that code. So that's going to test something like, if I give it this number and it's less than the number I need, it should tell me it failed, and I don't have to actually do any clicking myself. So you vastly cut down the amount of time that it takes to test a single thing. And you can do that across every possible scenario and feature in your application. And what's really cool about that is you can end up solving something called regressions, which basically means as you add new features to your project, you don't have to retest all the old stuff, because spoiler alert, as a project grows, adding new things is not only going to break the new things. Old things will regularly break as a direct result of new things you've added. So being able to rerun old assumptions is a very good idea. Now, there's a limitation to all of this, which is the kinds of tests you run on automated code is not really what a person's going to do. A good example of this is I've written a load of tests in the past for code that, like, it's an input box and you type in a number, and I've checked you can't have a bad number, you can't put in letters, you can't do all this stuff. And I do all of these different edge cases and the code works perfectly fine. But if you make a UI and you let a user play with it, and the user clicks into it and then clicks away and then clicks a button they're not supposed to at the wrong time, they can do something that you'd never even consider testing because they're messing with the UI. Or in one example that I had, I think I've mentioned this before, I had a file select box in an application where you click a button, it opens up the file chooser, you click a file, and then it does a lot of processing on the file. And in all of my testing, it never occurred to me to test what would happen if someone opened the box and then closed the box without picking a file. Because why would you open a box to pick a file and then never pick a file? And so that didn't happen until I saw a user use it. And it was so obvious in retrospect, the whole application crashed because I just assumed there would be a file ready by the time I got to that line of code. And so user testing is a very different thing. And so what you can do with automated testing in more kind of, because there's different stages of testing, is sometimes you want to test what physically happens when something's interacted with, a UI especially. And so the way you do that is if you have a shape on the screen that's your UI or your game, you kind of know where everything is, right? Because you can see it. It's a certain amount of pixels from certain distances of the corners. And so what a lot of systems will do is they'll take a picture of the screen where all the different images and like the health bar would be, and you could say do an action like walk forward into this spiky bush or something, which would take 10 health, and you can check if the image has moved to the new image, which is the image of the health bar with less numbers on it or something. So there's other kinds of testing you can do where you can run through processes which aren't just the code, but are the full integration test of from user scenario of how they'd click it. This is really useful for UI stuff where you want to try like loads of menus. If there's like filling in a whole system with lots of menu items and things, you want to test every possible scenario you can. So then there's also the whole process of AI style testing, which we've talked about before, which is if you're trying to balance things, sometimes having AI fight each other and see the rates of winning and losing and different things can help you zone in on right numbers to make sense for assigning things. So testing is a huge field, and there's lots of ways to do testing. Then as well with the data, sometimes you're testing against something third party. So we talked about Steam integration. If you want to test your application and your achievement unlocking, you may not want to be constantly pinging Valve servers and like making a mess of sending real data back and forth when what you're really doing is just testing, if I collect the 5th pineapple, do I get the achievement I'm supposed to have? So there's other kinds of tests you can do there where, like we talked about imposters, there's another concept called fakes or mocks, which is certain systems in your application, if you've designed the architecture to support it, you can swap out the real one for a fake one or a mock. And that will basically say, when I'm supposed to be sending this information to Valve, instead, just check the number. Tell me, did it send achievement with this number with this amount? Then you can presume that's good, because it's not your job to test that Valve server works. It's your job to test whether your code sent the right information. And the presumption is the third-party service that you're connecting to will do its job correctly beyond that point, because even if it didn't, nothing you can do about it. So that's past your control. So testing is a very interesting concept, and to kind of close it up to round back as to what we were saying, is it done a lot in Unity? Well, to tell the truth, not really. And that's why I'm quite interested in something like this, because applications tend to have a load of steps. And with enterprise software, correctness is the most important thing. Like if you're writing software which is users' real information or users' data or bank account details or something, you can't really make many mistakes. And so you want to make sure that things are doing what they're supposed to do. And so those systems have a higher barrier for how many things you need to get right. In games, if something doesn't go right, it's not as good of a user experience. But we've all seen a lot of games recently that have come out in half-broken states, and realistically, it's not the end of the world. Some people get annoyed, but functionally, that's fine. So the amount of testing required will differ depending on the kinds of platforms and stuff you're building for. And so in games, traditionally, it's about game feel. And so a lot of game testing is usually literally using a QA department or quality assurance, and they will physically just play the game and write down weird stuff that happened. As a general rule, unless you're an actual really big studio and your game is very data driven, like an MMO or something, I've not seen a lot of testing done at that kind of style. So bringing in more unit testing by splitting off systems that can be tested in isolation, or adding tools like this to test your game from an integration standpoint, I think is extremely good and should be done more often. But it's not really a cultural thing that I've seen, especially not in indie space downwards. A couple of larger companies do it, but realistically, it's very time intensive, and it's kind of unique skill. I mean, it sounds weird to say, but being able to find edge cases is a hard thing to do. You have to kind of be good at breaking things, and that may not seem like a skill, but it is. It's actually very hard to come up with scenarios that will actively cause things to break. So yeah, it's a very complicated topic.
Yeah, I found that simpler seeming games tend to be more likely to actually implement and integrate testing to things that are like puzzle games and other things where the solving is kind of obvious. I mean, from a not obvious like how you solve the puzzle and all that, but it's obvious like what can go wrong and what can't go wrong, and it's easy to kind of build up those tests and get a good point of like we're actually covering useful stuff versus like an FPS or some other bigger adventure game where there's so many things to test. It's what do you test?
Or even like something like Spelunky, where like everything is interactable all in like the same kinds of ways, and it's like you never could predict like what some weird, crazy, wild thing that some player might do.
Speaking of testing random things like that, in Terraria we recently got a bug report where one of the bosses ends up going into negative defense because it's a thing in Terraria, only for that one boss, where because it's negative, he actually takes more damage from every attack. It's like literally that correlates to how much damage you take. So if it's negative, you just take more damage. But we have an armor penetration stat, and what that does is says take down a portion of their armor, so we make the attack deal more damage depending on how much armor they have. But apparently, if the armor was negative, the attack would just straight up add all the armor penetration, even though there is no armor to penetrate. So the attack deals more damage instead of less.
Nice.
And that was something we didn't find for years, and it's been in the game for a while. So that is handled now. It's just a really funny small tidbit there. Also regarding testing a lot of units, as it were, instead of an integration, and then just praying that all the integrated components work together. I tend to find them less appealing a test to write, because I don't like that tests take a long time to complete. Knowing and getting a report that eventually something is wrong with your application is good, but waiting a long time for those application problems to show up is bad, in opinion. I tend to want to write isolated tests or mocked integrations, as it were, making sure that two units can work together, but with all the rest of their environments sped up or brought up to a degree where it's almost instant to know the situation up front, so that if anything goes wrong, I can immediately fix it. The regressions in the code, as it were. And tying it back to you, Johnny, actually, with DOTS, I'm really excited about how you can see the entire world in a unit test. That's something that like I'm really waiting for DOTS to get popularized, just so I can start having assets that I can literally say spawn a player in a test world and run the test of the actual entire simulated world and tell me if it actually works without waiting for full update render cycles in the game. It's like one of the very first things I did when I started working with DOTS. I literally opened up and started making tests, like as a setup, make a world, as a setup for the test, spawn the object, run the test on the object, tell me if it actually worked, kill the object, remove the entity, and then continue doing that. And it's like, it's really, really nice. It's also even better because with DOTS, you can actually make the world go frame by frame, even in the simulation at runtime. So you can literally watch as something goes wrong and see the exact step that take to make that happen. And because there's increased determination with the entirety of the DOTS tech stack, you have less model behavior hidden fields or behavior fields because you don't write in Unity. More control. I'm really loving where Unity is heading there.
Yeah, no, totally. And actually, kind of along those lines, I don't know if you've experimented with the new entities journaling feature at all, but the video that I just put up on my channel on Friday, I kind of go over some of the new like profiler analysis type things that are available in the entities 0.50 update. And then one topic that I also did talk about was this entities journaling, where it literally just keeps an entire record of everything that happens in your game. So like any components that are added or removed from entities, maybe any systems that are now new in the world, or every single like time a data component changes. So like every single frame that a character's moving, its data is going to be tracked every single frame, and you can go back through that whole history and see exactly when things were changing on what specific frame. Get an idea of the system that changed that particular data component. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely great to see it happening, and it's also preparation in a sense for collecting more analytics on games in general, because that becomes a more valid and important field in the industry recently. One thing that I see competitive games do a lot, and they're proud to talk about it, they show heat map where characters run around on the map and tracking down the paths that characters take, and that way which fields may need addressing. It's an important thing to figure out, and getting like a journaler in general to work with, standardizing working with one, is great to have.
There are some questions about animation stuff. You guys ready to jump onto them? They're asking about which animation packs are good, and I've grabbed this one because I believe Yorai recommended it. This is the one you recommended, right? Animation designer? It's you or Jason? Somebody did.
No, I wasn't specifically this one, but everything from Impossible is great. So you can't go wrong. So it depends on what you're trying to do with animation. Like if you're trying to make the actual character animation, multiple approaches there, but I never actually bothered to do that because I know how to use Blender. So if you're talking about actually playing the animations you do have in Unity, then Animenser is my one and only answer there. So again, there are multiple layers to discuss when you're talking about animation offering. The first is actually having an animation to play. The second is having variations of play, and third is actually running that animation in runtime and making sure it blends nicely or doesn't blend when it needs to not with everything else. And then the fourth layer is making sure that it fits with the rest of the world, specifically with inverse kinematics usually. So every single one of these topics has assets of their own. And I would probably give a different answer for each of them. So for example, somebody just mentioned UMotion Pro, which is an asset that I would give specifically to that second layer, having variations of the animations. Because as we discussed about destructive workflows versus non-destructive workflows, one of the things that infuriate me the most with Unity is that when you're trying to make an animation and you want to change anything about it, the only recourse you have is to either remake the asset FBX or duplicating the animation, destroying the link to the FBX, the original, and then only working with the asset in Unity forever. I freaking hate it. And UMotion Pro supposedly here's that you can then bake into a new animation. So what you can do is you can have an FBX animation, then you can have a layer of adjustment saying, I wanted the character's hand to be a bit more up. And then you can save that and use that animation in your actual game. And then that's a non-destructive workflow. So that's great, but it doesn't let you make the animation from scratch. I think it does have tools for it, but I'm not sure if I would recommend that versus any other asset. Because generally speaking, Unity isn't a power tool for moving things around for animation purposes. If you're going to be moving a lot of bones with hierarchy chains and you want to have relative movement for some stuff, like say if I'm moving the entire hand up, I want the other limbs to go up a tiny bit as well instead of just stretching the arm up. All of these things are non-trivial. So Unity isn't a power tool for it, and trying to make it into one via an asset is not something I recommend. You have digital content creation tools that are way, way better and have been used with this for years and have their own plugins. So it's worth just learning to use them, in my own opinion. Not that having the entire work on the engine isn't beneficial in a sense. It's just that if you're going to hire anyone, you're not going to want to make them study the engine from scratch with your own workflow. It's better to have some. You're already trying to hire them based on what they know with another tool. So you're already losing their entire training with the tool that they've used to make you hire them if you're trying to make them work with the engine.
That's why it's a lot better to use an actual game engine too than building your own if you want to actually hire people. It's a whole lot easier to hire people with Unity or Unreal experience than with our custom engine that only 50 people in the world have ever seen experience.
So that's my thought on the first layer. I never want to build it from scratch in Unity. We have to. On the second layer, UMotion Pro is the only one I think that actually has a solution that I like there for building an animation non-destructively, adjusting it. And then with playing the animations, it's Animencer 100%. Specifically speaking, when you try to play an animation in Unity, if you use the animator at all, one of the biggest problems with it is that you have to use an animation either hash or the string name. And those two are prone to failure, and it's really driving me crazy. Specifically speaking, because if you change the animation state name, then your attempt to find the string into a hash fails now. And Unity doesn't come with autocomplete for it or validation or what have you. So what Animencer does is it lets you play the animation clip with the Playables API. That's a newer thing for animations for Unity. Directly loads the animation data to the animator, and you never have to interact with random names or hashes. You have the asset, and you have a state that it is being played, not being played, or whatever have you. And you can manually adjust it directly. If you want to adjust play speed, you literally go state.playspeed or state.speed, whatever it was, and you can set it to whatever number you want. So if you want to scale with attack speed, you don't need a parameter that now you have to bind to a bazillion animations. You literally just have a state. Here's your attack speed. Have fun. That interfere things, because if animations that blend or blending two instances of the same clip is another thing that I found as an interesting topic. It's also something that Animencer can do for you that with Unity is going to be more annoying to do.
What do you mean blending two instances of the same clip?
So let's say you have a character that is trying to move forward, but okay, you know what? Let's do that with a swing, because I don't remember the exact instance where I needed it. But basically speaking, I wanted to start a character dash forward and then dash forward again within the same dash. Now, if I were using one Unity animation state and I called play again, it would be in a burped transition from the middle of the dash into the new dash. Like it would be like, because it's the same state, I'm literally just moving the normalized time of what animation sample to have. I can't crossfade into myself, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So you either need to start managing two states for it, or you literally have no other in Unity default animator controller. But with Animencer, I can just literally say, yeah, just give me another instance of this state and just crossfade into that. And it's like, it's done dynamically without me having to duplicate all my work. Because if I make two states in the animator controller, I now have to change each one of them with the same changes every time I want to make a subtle adjustment.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's something I hadn't thought about. I want to really quickly just have everybody get aware that they can enter to win the giveaway, because I want to start that in just a few minutes, probably in like the next 5 minutes. If you wanted to enter to win, let me switch screen sharing real quick. I'll pop that up. Everybody can see it. It's up and running in the background. But all you have to do is choose a race and class. They're listed right up there. You can pick whichever one you want, and then we'll have everybody fight and see who wins. And you come in and you'll get put into the little holding area. Somehow I screwed up though, and everybody after a certain point ends up stacked on top of each other. Eventually you'll get out of line though and come out and be in the fight and stuff. So if you wanted to enter, just watch everybody in chat, copy them or something, and we can go off of that. There was now a question about Final IK, and before the chat all disappears, I just wanted to ask, is it something you guys have used? I used Final IK back in the day, and it worked great. It was a really powerful system for inverse kinematics, but is it something you guys have used now, or is there a replacement or an alternative that you'd recommend instead of Final IK, or would you use it? Or
I used it before.
I've used it on a lot of projects. Because for VR, it's like it saves you so much hassle having a rigged character in VR. Other than that, the grounder alone is great. Literally, if you just have a character who's walking along a surface and they do that really weird walking up a hill where their feet aren't actually touching the ground, it's extremely noticeable to a person watching your game. Literally just click a grounder to their feet and done. Suddenly the difference is like night and day in how good it looks. So out of the box, even just grounding your things using Final IK is already a huge deal. But they have a lot of nice quality of life stuff in there too. Like having ranges of constraints of rotation for certain bones and things for when you're doing, like you could have a head look to follow the player, but then limit the rotational range so they'll only ever look, but they won't like go full 180 with their head
all the way off.
Yeah. And again, like it's amazing. You could take a character who's just a standard standing there animation, and you give it their head rotates to look at the player and their feet like walk on the ground correctly, and it goes from looking like cheap to looking high quality in just a couple of additional scripts. So I think it's a must-have. It's one of the better, or at least most consistently valuable assets in the asset store.
Apparently, I got it back in 2016. It's definitely a good one.
Second everything Jason just said there a moment ago. Grounder is specifically the best thing and the main thing I've for. There are alternatives these days, but they're not quite as good as Final IK. Somebody specifically mentioned the new Unity animation rigging package.
Yeah, Unity have their own package now, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I would still recommend Final IK over it.
Yeah, I tried it once, and it felt very fiddly. It felt like a lot of individual scripts that had a lot of tweaking values, and I ended up preferring the Final IK one.
So there's two parts to this. First, you're right, it's different. It's more componentized and individualized, but it doesn't have an alternative to what Final IK does specifically. It gives you IK. It doesn't give you the IK for the purposes that you want. It gives you general purpose IK. And you still have to do the entire thing of like finding the ground, finding out what the shape of your foot should be and where should it be and how do you blend it into if your character became airborne or groundborne now. There's a lot of details that go into what Final IK does for you that is not in the animation rigging package. But more importantly, the animation rigging package straight up breaks a lot of interaction with other components for the animation, because it acts as part of the animation sampler. So every time you sample animation, there is a pass where the animation rigging does its own thing, and then you end up getting the animation, as it were, with all the changes. Part of this being problematic is you can't control the order of how you want things to be done. So, say if I want to have an object snap into my character's hand, but then I want to say use Impossible's leaning animator, which leans the character in either side, I can't control the order if I'm using animation rigging, because what happens is the animator samples itself, the animation rigging does its thing and snaps the sword into my character's arm, and leaning, and it's not on the character's arm bone. It's a separate object. It's important to note that down. And then leaning animator comes in and moves my character's body sideways, and the arm moves up. But because the sword is not a child of the hand, I now have a floating sword that's disconnected from the arm. And there's no solution to it other than integrating it with animation rigging. Now, eventually, I assume that people will start using animation rigging more widespread, and then we're going to get plugins that do work and let us control the order of the rigs with animation rigging. But right now, it's not what we have. And basically, animation rigging doesn't work with anything else. Therefore, I prefer everything else over animation rigging. Because if I did this with Final AK, I could say, yeah, give me Final AK first and then the sword, or the sword AK, and now I'm solving my problem.
It seems like everybody's on board with it. And yeah, I agree. Animation rigging stuff seems cool, but it's not at the point anywhere near Final IK. Like, you just want to get in there and get it working.
It's solving different problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it feels like animation rigging is more like just the core base piece, and then Final IK is the final thing built on top of it, right? It's like the
yeah, it's not built on top of it. It's built separately, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. I just meant like layer wise. Not that they're actually related, but like one's like a low level API, one's more of a high level API that does all of the actual jobs for you. So I wanted to kick off our giveaway real quick. Just have everybody hit the like button, and once you do, the giveaway battle will start, and everybody will start fighting in the background. And I'll leave it up on the screen for a minute, and then just leave it fighting up behind me so you can watch yourself defeat people or get knocked out. And the winner will get a free copy of JetBrains Rider, my favorite code editor. Thanks again to JetBrains for giving us those to give away. It's really awesome. All right, I'm going to hit the button and start it as soon as I see an even number of battlers on my screen. So don't expect that to take too long. And then I guess we could, oh, you know what? I'm not even going to wait. I'm just going to hit the button. There we go. Battle is starting. So if you wanted to fight, well, you missed your chance, I guess. Join in on the next battle next week. We'll be giving away another one
next week.
Another one next week. So everybody should come out. Okay, we got the first fighters already out. I want to just briefly watch them. I've kind of rearranged things so that they would fit better into a squeezed view like this.
Oh, I'm getting destroyed right now.
Included more fights.
Oh, that's right. I think oh, you know what I did? I accidentally added in the there's the sub matches, the semifinals. I must have added those into the list of all available ones. So we got 6 going at once instead of 4.
Good.
Lots of fighters. And if you don't see yourself yet, you're probably up in the sidelines and you'll come down for one of the next rounds. So as the round ends, the people will rotate out. And if you win, you should see that you get a power up depending on, well, you'll get a power up no matter what, but you might get a visual indicator of your power up as well, depending on your race that you've picked. Some of them have 3 different tiers, and I decided last week to just integrate in the different tiers so you can see it. Now, I don't know if I won or lost, though. I wasn't looking.
I lost.
No.
I still haven't made it past the first round on one of these.
You haven't?
No.
Oh, man.
It's rigged.
Watching people drop. We got 4 down. We got nothing but paladins fighting now. All the paladins remaining. Those are the ones with the heal effect, so they take forever to kill. They have lower damage. I don't know. We'll see who wins. I did buff bards and berserkers last week, so we'll see if that makes a difference or not. All right, I think we could probably jump back.
I was a bard, so maybe not.
Oh, yeah. We have a lot of bards. 32 of them are bards. And yeah, a lot of rats too. Probably because that's what the description says. Type rat to join. All right, we got. I'll watch one more round, and then I think we'd jump back over to a couple of the other assets that I want to talk about.
Why am I here?
Yora's in there.
You must have said something in chat. What did you say?
I think I responded to someone about the audio issues, but oh no, I did not mean to get into the competition.
Oh, now you're in there. Now you're a little dragon guy. That's the dragon too.
Now I must survive.
Oh yeah, watch you win. Take them all out and start breathing fire. Oh, you got your wings.
You evolved. Wow.
Oh. Imagine not even trying to get into the competition and surviving the first round.
You survived and you got wings and upgraded. Let's see who's going to win this last fight and see if they get the upgrade. I think it turned into a wolf, and then the other one gets to like a 3-headed snake or something, and eventually a werewolf. All right, I'm gonna switch back over to Chrome for a minute. Look at a couple more of these assets. And then maybe if anybody wants to see the battle going on, you can't because it's behind my head. Here, I'll stand up. I'll quit being lazy. You can watch the battle in the background while we look at more assets. If I fall over, just call an ambulance. Tip over
Please
all
don't.
all the standing and stuff. So I wanted to look at this page, and fluffy grooming is one that Andrew always talks about. So I wanted to at least call it out, and I'll probably mention it a bit in the video. I assume you guys haven't played with that at all, have you?
Oh no.
Yeah, it's one that he is like obsessed with and talks about because it makes hair and fur, and he's all into that. But I wanted to just check in. What about Mesh Baker? Is that something you guys have used?
No, but I do own it.
You do own
At
it.
one
Okay.
point, at one point, I figured I'm totally going to need this when I'm building my entire open world, and I was all excited. And then I realized there was a lot I didn't know about all the creation of stuff, and then I just dive deep into it, and now I never want to get into it. So I'm only building flat little white boxes when I'm fighting things.
Nice. Yeah, that's
Shapes
like me.
is up there, and you need to get it.
Yeah. This is another one I wanted to call out. Now I have 0 artistic skill, so it's not one that I actually use, but I'm always blown away by like what people actually fucking build when they do have even a tiny bit of artistic ability. And obviously Freya's like insane art skills, and just math skills combined, like the ability to put those
It's
two
not.
together. So go ahead.
It's not even just art stuff. It's literally for diagnostics and debug. You can literally just draw things on the scene to help yourself figure out what's going on, or draw curves or whatever you need to visualize information that is otherwise hard to obtain.
Is that what you use it for?
Yeah, specifically, I wanted to like draw a path. There is this Tom Clancy's The Division. When I played it originally, had this thing where the character would get a line showing where they need to go, and I wanted to replicate that once. And I ended up getting enough path and then drawing it shapes over the scene so it would look nice. But I got to see the path, and then I had an enemy that was doing weird wobbling. So I just said, "Hey, you know what? Take that system and show me where he's trying to go." And I got to see his lines spazzing all over the place because it was trying to reach something weird. So it's useful for multiple purposes, not just artistic stuff. Like in Unity, it's hard to use debug.drawLine or drawRay because they tend to be very thin, and you can't easily separate them for multiple objects. And you can't control you can control perfectly where they are, but they're not as pretty, and they don't give you extra information like the flow of where they came from or where they're going to. So you could draw it in different ways, but now you're just making annoying methods where you could just take this and just say fancy gradient with I don't know, a flow going from the start point to the end point, and just use that for my line. Now I have a line that shows me where it came from, where it's going to, and I also know what progress is it along the way because of the gradient color.
I'm gonna have to give it a try. So I've always just considered it something that I wouldn't be able to use because I had no artistic ability at all. And everything looks so damn pretty. And every time I see that, I'm like, oh, I can't make anything look that pretty. But I think your use cases like make a lot of sense. It's something I should try out because I could do it, and it would probably. I want to see how it works. I'm gonna give it a shot. Just kind of rambling and to myself right now, but. Yeah, because I'd always thought of it as like, building pretty fancy UI type stuff and elements, but I think using it in the debug sense, like I would actually still get a ton of value out of it, save time, and even if it doesn't look as pretty as everybody else's, it'd still work, and maybe it will look pretty, and I'm just being crazy.
It's also good for dynamic animation in general. Like, even if you're not doing much beyond basic colors, just the flow of the color going out, like one she had with the drawing array of what the character's skill should be like, that too is insanely valuable.
Yeah, I think it's something I need to dive into and actually try. I've looked at it a bunch, thought that looks freaking amazing. But I've never actually had a use, so I'm gonna try it out for some debug stuff like that. And then dynamic bone was one that you recommended, right, Yuri?
Yes.
Got that one.
Specifically speaking, that was the most popular solution for VR chat, character hair, and cloth animation, because it's performant. You basically have bones that let you move the hair and the cloth or tail or body parts in this case in the demo. And when you use that, it's very easy to author, because just like moving an arm, you can just say, well, give this hair strand like a limb, and then you can debug by moving it around, posing it, and see how it will break or how far it can move. It's performant, it's good, and it's easy to make. So if you can dynamically move it, you now get a flowing living object that was easy to create without a lot of performance issues. And VR chat trying to have like a whole audience of people, it's going to matter. You can't make a skirt with like 5,000 vertices all moving separately. If you can just make that into 6 bones and let those flow.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Get good performance there.
Yeah.
And you said it's big in VR chat.
Yes.
Oh, that makes sense too. Yeah, it's been a while since I played with VR chat, but check that out again.
It's probably important to mention that I think they added a new physics bones solution of their own in the VR chat SDK free, something like that. I didn't look much into it because I don't actually play VR chat. I just love the technology, and I buy models for VR chat so I can see how they get made, so I can make better models myself. So basically, they have their own solution now, as far as I understand, but dynamic bone is still used for other things really, really nicely.
And what about this, Claxel? Somebody asked about this in chat. I forgot I popped this up. I've never used this one. It looked really cool, but it was another one of those that like looked like something that I would never be able to use because I have no artistic skill.
I haven't used this particularly. I think the closest thing I've messed around with would be like Mudbox from Maya, or Autodesk rather.
Yeah. Okay, so nobody's used this one. If anybody in chat has, let me know. Kind of curious.
So
enjoy messing around with it for artistic. That's me.
I just want to highlight FM Productions' comment because it's really insightful. Dynamic bones they were a good solution for their time, but they happened before Unity jobs became a thing, so they don't rely on it. And now there are transform jobs that you can run things at way better scale. So both VR Chat has their own new solution, as I mentioned, but also Magica Cloth is a new good alternative in the asset store that's being used in a lot of more recent games. Even Morbid Metal is using it for the character's cloth. That one game with HDRP we covered a while back.
That was the Magica cloth one?
Yes.
Yeah. That's not it.
Magica with a.
Oh, it's a K, huh?
Magica.
Oh, it's because it's not on sale. I was like, why am I not finding it? Like,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I spelled it right the first time. I just didn't check the box. Got it. Okay, so here it is. Oh, this one. Yes, seen this a bunch of times.
Yeah.
I'll link that. Everybody wants to check it out, but this is it. Okay, let me go back. My terrible attempts at finding stuff. We're down to 80 people left in the battle, by the way. We're watching it on my little screen here. Hopefully you guys can see it back there. But
we're watching it on your other little screen as well.
Watch it over my head. I need to get it like as a green screen behind me now. I think there was one or two other things on sale that I wanted to really quickly look at, and then maybe we could jump back over to some more of those Unreal things that are out there and talk about some of those, or take questions, whatever you guys prefer. Let's see if I can get back. I searched so many times, so many buttons. Back. I'll find it eventually. One more click back, I think. Should have the list. And if anybody in chat had anything really cool that you think you're curious about or we should talk about. Oh, this atavism one, I really want to check this out. It's like an online, it's a multiplayer MMO kit. I think it's kind of like UMMORPG. I've wanted to try it out forever. I just don't want to spend $500 to go test something out. 250 maybe, but that one seemed kind of interesting. But again, I don't have an actual project for it, so it's just like a screwing around type thing. And then I think there was something else.
Speaking about UMMORPG and networking in general, beyond the fishnet thing that you've been trying out over the weekend, did you get a chance to read about photon fusion?
Not a whole lot. I did some reading about it, but I haven't dug in and actually tried it out or gone through like the detailed documents. It looks pretty interesting and cool, but until I actually try it out and see what it's like, I was trying to avoid getting too excited. Have you dug into it yet?
Yes, also my camera died.
That's okay.
Yeah, so basically speaking, I've been reading the entire documentation, and there's one feature that's been really like creeping into my sleep cycle because I can't stop thinking about it. And it is that they also apparently have a way to switch between client view, a server view, and like another client within the single Unity editor now. By the way that they're working on the update cycle, they introduced their own networked fixed update in a sense, and then that lets you control the object only when the network wants to update it and do replication. So what they can do is that because they're logging all the data, you can swap between what client view you have by moving all the objects around. I didn't actually try it in the editor yet. I've been just poring over the entire documentation. So it's really interesting. Also, I'm going to try and fix my camera for a moment, so BRB.
Okay. Yeah, the Fusion, it does look cool. It's something I wanted to check out. I was actually going to dive into it until I stumbled on the fishnet stuff, asked everybody about it, and everybody loved it. And then I tried it out, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. So it's still on my short list of stuff to actually dive into and try out. But I'm curious. I'll try that out and make me a little bit more interested in checking it out sooner than later. Oh, cool. That was not the one I meant to pick, but that was a good one.
So
this is one, yeah. So you're always describing the runners. You can have one per client. You have multiple runners in the Unity editor to run multiple clients. Essentially, it sounds like in the editor. Okay. And then somebody else said the downside is the pricing. I haven't looked at it at scale to see what that's like.
Yeah, but I mean, the value of making something quickly and just getting to send it out to other people without having to make like free builds every single time you change a line of code or game object just so you can try and see the simulation going right. The value is incomparable. I mean, if you're trying to make a commercial project, then yeah, of course this matters. But also, if you're making a commercial project, it feels like peanuts.
Because you've got to compare this to the cost of running, managing, and maintaining your own servers too. Right, you've got to like that cost is in there too. Running 2,000 concurrent users, if you're setting it up yourself and running that, like that's going to cost money too, and it may end up costing more. So yeah, the price part there doesn't really bother me too much. Although I do like that Fishnet's completely free, which is pretty cool too. I'm gonna pull that one up real quick. So URI's camera died again. Saying that doesn't include server costs. If that's the case, then I don't know. To look at it more. If that's just the licensing cost and not the server usage too.
Oh,
that could be the case. Where's unchecked flash deals? So if I can find it, can I? Why can't? Oh, on sale only. Uncheck that.
There you go.
This was the networking library that I've been playing with and did a video on yesterday. So I did a video yesterday showing how to make like a really simple multiplayer setup with some characters. I set up some creatures that could walk around and pick up power-ups to grow their spikes and then change their colors. Nothing super exciting, but it was really freaking easy. It didn't take much work at all. and the variables and the methods. RPCs were just easy to set up. I didn't have to do anything hard. So I was kind of surprised at how easy it was, and just figured I should mention and share that one too.
Yeah,
Welcome
I
back,
actually
Yorai.
watched. Thank you. I actually watched you when you. The replay of the video as you worked on it, and I wanted to say that the demos that work out of the box is something that's present in most of the packages these days. Like Pon2 also has some of them that you can just like build and run and immediately try out. But the way that you can make an attribute that points into an onChange method, that was really convenient.
Yes.
Because you only have to offer it like in one place and you can still name it whatever you want. So I have high appreciation for things that don't make me use their naming practices. But I do want to point out that I have high aversion to code generation. Like trying to figure out like why is my method getting called? It's code that's nowhere to be found in the project, and I'm debugging. Something goes wrong. What went on there? It's really frustrating to work with code generation when it's not tightly integrated and inspectable. In my own opinion.
Interesting. I don't know if there's another way to go about getting the kind of performance that you need though without that code generation.
Yeah, no,
when
I
it
mean,
comes to networking libraries.
I fully understand that. It's just, if it's magic, it's magic. Therefore, you can't work with it. You can't logicalize it. That's the main problem. Now, I don't know if they actually use code generation or just reflection to find the attributes to call the methods to do the thing they need to do.
Some code generation in there. There's a whole subfolder for code generation.
Okay.
Where it's in that, and I assume it to pack everything down and get it so that it can be optimized. But I wanted to pull up real quick your onChange thing that you were calling out too. So this was the variable attribute that you add to have it synchronized from the server to the client, and then you can add an onChange and just have it call a method onChange on the client or on the server. Or I guess it will only be on the client because it gets synced from the servers to the client. Which is cool because the other way to do this is making yourself have to have an RPC and pass this in as a parameter, or have to watch for this value changing in some other setup. So this is much cleaner and much nicer than most of the other ways I've seen to synchronize this kind of stuff and deal with an update.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it does have a performance cost because you're calling a method every single time a value changes, but you get the easy authoring of like specifically, hey, I want just to make a particle spawn every time I lose health to know the player will get hurt or play a sound or whatever have you. Now, there is a benefit to having that separate from being an RPC because you might just want to update the UI whenever the health changes, but not play hurt sound every time that the health goes down because it might be poison that hits you or anything else. It's important to separate what this event actually means versus what actually happened.
I put the battle back up since we're down to just the last couple rounds of people, so we can watch that while we discuss the rest.
Yeah, to reply to IDERP about Fusion has basically the same onChange thing. I know, and I also said that I also thought to myself when I was reading about it that even though it's freaking amazing with the ability to swap between everything, I really don't love code generation in general, even when it's about networking. Like, with Terraria, we don't have any of that, and I much prefer that to debugging the issues that I have.
Interesting. You guys have any thoughts on code generation? Feelings, strong or weak?
Well, the new version of entities, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. It does basically use code generation quite heavily. Luckily with that, you are actually able to inspect the generated code, and it kind of does give you some, good debugging stuff that, can kind of point to the correct place. So it doesn't really have some of the similar challenges that Yorai was kind of alluding to earlier.
Yeah.
I like it for editor tooling, but I'm not a fan of it for live projects. And personally, I despise any scripts which use the partial keyword to generate half a class, because if you're going to be using code generation, at least generate separate classes and reference them. if you're trying to generate half a class, now again, I understand why in WinForms and stuff it does that, but it's extremely confusing because now you're getting into random code, just methods that are being generated to exist, which can get very confusing. So as long as you're doing it for the sake of making, lists or automation in the editor, that's fine. But I try to avoid it in live projects.
To be fair, I'm not against the concept of code generation. I'm just against the concept of not being able to freaking know what's going on when I do need it. Like, I want to be able to see the result. And with dots, it's perfectly fine because we can inspect it. But the other projects that I see using code generation, at least with Unity, don't deliver the same amount of convenience. And this is a big problem because I call this convenience, but it is necessary in my own opinion. If I were working on a commercial project, it's beyond frustrating when there is an issue outside of the code that you've written and you have nothing you can do about it because you can't even see how it works. With XNA, we've had a lot of issues like that where we'll get like random errors that are completely. How the hell am I still alive in the Gutlers?
You and
Thank you for
Jason
fighting Jason.
Story are
You're not about to be after this.
2 dragons.
Oh.
Well, enjoy this one.
Yes, this is definitely going to be a good one. Somebody asked if these are subscribers battling. Yes, it's whoever entered the battle before we kicked it off. It looks like Story is kicking your ass, Yori.
1 HP.
Oh,
1
let's
HP.
go.
Come back.
Watch that come back. Oh, that would have been hilarious.
You nearly had a comeback there. Yeah.
The anime
Yes,
moment.
it's just all the people who've entered, and it looks like bards may have been overbuffed. So it's all bards in the final. I think we will be nerfing some bards, or maybe doing all new classes next week. Maybe I'll just delete all the classes and we'll make a fresh new set of them to go with the races.
Oh well,
Be interesting.
I was in the semifinals.
All right, we got Story versus Richter. Did I read that right, Nicholas?
To RL and Post 2, this is the Butlers project that Jason Weimann built, and we've assisted on the side at times. It's being used weekly here for giveaways and just watching things to have fun together with the entire stream.
Yeah, the first time we just did a random selection from a list, but that's not nearly as fun as having everybody fight it out and have it randomly pick with some nice visuals. And here it's semi-random because we did give the races and classes stats and shared those publicly. So if you wanted to download them, they were in the description. And I have no idea what's best. It looks like bards are probably the strongest right now, though, since they seem to be winning. And let's see who's going to win it.
We already have the winner, though.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations, Jason. Story.
Yeah.
That was unexpected. So I'll send a code to Jason and the second place winner because my last week one didn't work properly anyway. So I've got an extra code and that'll work out perfect.
Okay.
Somebody asked the question, what we're using to switch screens and record, and I just wanted to briefly mention that is Restream. So just use this restream.io. It lets me bounce around and change the view, highlight people, rearrange everybody, move them, make them dizzy and all that. And it's super simple. You just give people a link. I literally pop out the same invite link every week, and all these guys just jump in. And I assume it's been relatively easy for you guys. What do you guys think of Restream?
I mean, it's great as far as I'm concerned. The only thing I wish we had is to be able to literally comment from the Restream window.
Yeah. Having to have a second window just to add comments to the YouTube chat is a bit annoying.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. You can't, so you guys can't see the chat window like I have here and then click things. It would be nice.
No, we can see the chat, but we just can't like add to it. We have to have the YouTube window open to.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it'd be nice if you could go in there and pin things. Do you have the option to pin stuff now, or is that only on me?
Nothing's clickable there.
No.
Yeah, it'd be cool if you guys could do some of those integrations and be a bigger part of the chat too. So, but outside of that, it's freaking awesome and makes it easy to do streams like this. So if you've been thinking about doing some streams on your own, just go check it out. It's the simplest thing. You don't have to set up OBS. You don't have to set up anything complicated. You just get a link, hit the button, and it just connects to your streams and goes out to Twitch and YouTube and all the other stuff. So I definitely like it. I like to share the stuff that I like, so I'm gonna blab about it. Well, I think we're just about out of time. Maybe we'll just wrap it up right now with some final things, and then next week we'll dive into some more Unreal topics, because I know your eyes got like a ton of Unreal stuff.
It's actually pretty close to the end of like what we can discuss deeply, so we can just probably throw it out as lightning shots. In
Sure.
the dark. Yeah. So let's see. There was the control rig spaces. So we touched a lot about animations earlier, and we also discussed animation authoring. And I talked about how when you want to make an animation variation, there are a lot of things that you need to consider. So let's say you have an animation where the character needs to hold something in both hands, say a gun with the grip and the barrel. And when you want to move the hand relative to the barrel, there are a lot of considerations to take, because you're not moving it near the on the barrel, like relative to it. You're moving it relative to the character's rest of the hierarchy, the forearm, the shoulder, the torso. So different characters won't exactly have it convenient or at the same place. And what rig spaces give you is to say, this animation, this portion of it, the one where the character's hand is on the barrel, is all going to be in barrel space. So if it's barrel space 000, it's going to be stuck on the barrel perfectly, regardless of how the other character's hands move. And it's way easier to control an animation authoring experience this way. So that's a big, nice one. Like, it's underappreciated because, again, you have to author the animation in Unreal, so do with that what you will. But it's nice to have when you need it. And on top of that, they've added a lot of conveniences to working on the editor in general. So you can now favorite properties in an inspector depending on what you want to have. So, like, say, if you're balancing something and you say, I only care about damage numbers, I want to inspect damage numbers, show me the damage number at the top so I don't have to scroll down 50 components on this one game object every single time. You can do that now. This is your favorite property. Every single time you're going to select an object that has that, show it first. And you can toggle showing favorites on or off. So useful, easy to use, high value, in my own opinion.
That's one that I definitely want in Unity. Somebody should make that as an asset.
Yes. And on top of that, they also added searchable menus and submenus. Now, Unity already has a search everything functionality, but it's not as convenient because you're finding everything, even though you probably generally know the position of what you're looking for. So you can, in Unreal, go straight up to the menus and start typing, and you'll only look within that submenu for what you want. So
Nice.
I find that valuable for cutting down search times, because in a smaller menu you're going to get less results. So if you know what you're looking for, you can type less letters until you get what you need. This is
It reminds me I need to dive back into that whole search tool from earlier in the conversation too. Anybody that missed that, make sure you go back and check that out. The search thing looks freaking awesome.
So that was that. There was also the project acoustics. We've discussed audio with Sector earlier, but Unreal has been tightly integrating with Microsoft's project acoustics, which lets you it's like global illumination, but for audio, essentially. It lets you figure out how audio should travel and bake all that information into the scene. And then when you're trying to play it, you're going to get way richer audio experiences because of all the acoustics that you generated.
Yeah, that's really cool. That interests me a lot, especially.
Yeah, I'm also taking a lot of interest in it, like eyeing it, and I want to see what potential I can make. They also have the whole new meta sound system, which lets you manipulate and create audio at runtime with shader-like node graphs. So it's really valuable. You can say, from this library of free shots of a Gatling gun, pick one at random, adjust the pitch a bit, make it play it 5 times a second, and then try to ramp it up or ramp it down depending on the character's play rate. Also, every time you emit a sound, call an event, so that event can spawn a particle system, and that particle system can draw a different color based on the pitch of the thing you have. It's like an entire monolithic awesome system that they added. This is one of the sung heroes, but the acoustics are the unsung. So that was that on Project Acoustics. And the next thing I want to bring up, which ties into Johnny's bit quite well, is mass entity. So if you can bring that up. Basically, they added their own ECS-like framework for making data-oriented calculations on like a huge set of things. So the entire crowd simulation in the Unreal Matrix demo was using a mass entity for citizens walking around and then avoiding each other. They had a mass avoidance system for that. And they also let you assign smart objects within this mass entity simulation for the entities to interact with. So say benches to sit on. It's a lot of really interesting things to read about. I kind of want to play with it, but it sounds really scary as well. So I hope Johnny can help me out.
I haven't looked at this at all, so I'll have to investigate into it a little bit more and report back later.
Interesting. It looks like good for building out giant simulations, though, like cities and people and cars or anything like that, huh? Or I guess just anything at big scale.
Yeah, I mean the entire word term mass is why you want to have that.
Yeah. Alex said it looks like a less all-in approach to entities. It just works like without switching everything over. I wonder how much how accurate that is.
It's kind of difficult to iterate because when we talk about the data-oriented tech stack, it's literally in the name. But basically speaking, you're constructing multiple pieces of data and they're going to be per entity. So it's the same scale, but you get a more concrete implementation versus Unity. Here are entities, do whatever you want with them. This is a literal use case available with examples of how it's being used. I don't know how flexible it is compared to DOTS, but it's interesting.
Nice. And I think you probably have more, but I got to run in just a second. Yeah. So I think we'll hit the rest of these.
We're almost done. I just want to give one final shout out to synchronous physics simulation. Woo.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically fixed updates for Unity, and how things move is important, so be sure to figure it out.
Yes, that was... I think we should talk about that in depth next week. Just talk kind of deeper about...
There's not much documentation, but yeah, we can talk about the topic in general.
Yeah, I think just the topic in general would be really interesting. I think people would be interested. If you are interested in that, drop a comment and let us know. If everybody says they're not, then we'll skip it. But I think that's something worth talking about, how that physics simulation happens, how you keep it in sync too, if you want to have multiplayer physics or replicated physics that you can replicate, or what the differences are and kind of what some of the benefits are here. I want to really quickly, before we wrap things up, pop up this link. Let's see, did it work? Oh, okay. The GameDev Guild link, I'll drop that in chat if you're interested in that. It's coming up next month. So we'll be talking about Unity development, game stuff. Like I said, get the Fishnet developer has even just agreed to come on and do a talk about multiplayer networking and Fishnet. I think that's going to be something that a lot of people will be able to jump in and start using right away and be kind of interesting. So if that's interesting to you, make sure that you check it out. Also, don't forget to check out the asset store sale that's going on. There were a lot of cool things in there, including a few that Andrew had from the show. So if you're a fan of the show and you've been watching Andrew with his Infinity PVR stuff, he's got an insane number of things on the bundle right now. In fact, let me see if I can pull up his entire selection real quick just to show everybody, because he wasn't able to make it today, and I still want to make sure that everybody sees all of his cool stuff that's up there. He had all of his character packs that kind of go together and then allow you to drop on the different armor sets and other things in animation. So he's got just tons and tons of stuff that's all 50% off. There's a whole bunch more that's not 50% off, but there's however many things there are, 13 things, and a couple of them at 80% off. I'd definitely go at least grab those. I'll drop the link for that in chat as well, but it's in the description if anybody wants to go check it out. And I just want to see if anybody else has anything they wanted to briefly share, talk about before we wrap it up. that I should drop up here and share a link or anything? Anybody got a video or something else coming out? I know Jason's got a Ko-fi page that everybody should go sign up for and jump into the Discord, because that Discord is very active. I actually watch that relatively regularly because you guys are constantly talking in there.
So you have to follow my adventure then, as I was describing my flight chaos for the last 3 weeks or 3 days.
Jeez.
Yeah. So
That's
my
what
one
I've been
tip for the
watching
world is,
lately.
Yeah.
The trip to Boston.
everyone who was in my Discord got a really lucky blow by blow of 3 days of me having a misadventure that could have been a really good Faulty Towers episode. It's so over the top ridiculous that I'm going to record an audio thing and explain step by step all of the silliness that happened, because it's actually unbelievable how ridiculous it got. I will say, as a long story short, I didn't end up getting to Boston. I left 3 days to go to Boston, and it took 3 days for me to get back to Ireland again, and nothing happened. So yeah, it was an interesting journey.
It was a harrowing experience, and I'm glad you're home and safe.
Yeah, I'm just glad the whole bloody thing is over. But hey, one life lesson: don't fly KLM anymore. They are officially not my choice anymore.
Right, so there's the coffee page. You go sign up and be part of those discussions and all the other interesting tech discussions. And Johnny, did you have anything you wanted to drop in?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we kind of mentioned earlier, I think I was talking about some of the new profiler modules and entities journaling and all that. I just put up a video on that. And then another new Unity ECS feature that I'm putting out a video on this coming week is the new iJob entity job structure, which I really enjoyed working with. And so, yeah, it's going to be a cool video, just kind of, diving deep into that one, showing you what it is, how it works, and yeah, excited for that one to come out.
Nice. Check that out. I just linked it in the description. It's also on my YouTube channel, but I linked it in the channel, the description, and the chat. So you can go subscribe and check it out and start making more performant game stuff. And then I guess we'll end it with Yorai. You got any last things you want? I can't point that way. I can't do it.
Yeah.
Any last things you wanted to do? Oh, I got to point at my mic. There we go.
I don't have much to say, but somebody just mentioned that he wants to work on dots, but animation not being ready for ECS makes him want to go back to Unreal. Specifically, you can work with animation, you just can't work with dots animation. You can literally move the object freely using the animator system hybrid, and it should work fine.
All right. Okay, well, I guess with that, we'll just say make sure that you subscribe, hit thumbs up, drop a comment below, let us know if there's stuff you want us to change, add, or cover in the next one. Go to game.courses, check out the Easter bundle that ends today, and GameDev Guild, which doesn't end until next month. Oh, and Johnny's talking there too. And I think maybe Jason's story. Pretty sure he said he would probably be doing something. So we still have to finalize that, but.
Yeah, I got 100% my fault. I've been lazy organizing anything, but I'm up for it. I just need to actually talk to you at some stage and plan something.
Yeah, we'll set that up. What's that?
Talk to me too about that.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. Hell yeah. Okay, this is getting even better. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you all again next week. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and thanks again for joining us. I'm gonna find the button and hit goodbye.